Welcome back to the Sweatin Bullets Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, DFP Encounter. With me, as always, is a bunch of jumbled letters known as Jacob. You can follow him on Twitter at random assortment of letters. Just try the alphabet. I'm sure you'll find him. We have a trade deadline today, Jacob.
Oh, yeah. And
after the trade deadline.
Awesome. The NFL trade deadline used to suck.
Yeah.
Like, I remember a time when I was sitting in a lecture hall, and the most exciting thing that happened to me on NFL trade deadline day was like Jay Ajayi going to the Eagles. That was like the most exciting trade deadline trade, I think, of like a few years. And this week was like the NBA. I know that you don't watch any other sports, and in fact, you don't even watch this sport. But for those that do partake in the basketball sport, they actually usually have a lot of trades on trade deadline day. Hockey also has a lot of trade deadline trades. They actually have a program called Trade Center on the Sports Network.
I used to be a huge hockey fan. And I'm like watching on Twitter today, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, look at all these trades!" And I'm like, the NHL used to have like 25 trades on a deadline, like
it was sick.
15 years ago. Like, this isn't really that crazy, but it's crazy because no trades ever get made here.
But it's so much fun. Like the NBA and NHL trade deadlines are days that I look forward to all year. Like, I would try to take a day off work to like sit and watch Trade Center because it was so much fun.
I used to take the trade deadline off and stay home and watch Trade Center all day. It was glorious.
Yeah, and that's what I felt like today. Like, I was sitting in a tax lecture and I was like, I'm not paying attention to this. Like, I was like, there's too much going on. I mean, where should we start? Which trade are we going to talk about first? Because for those just coming into the show, we're going to talk about a bunch of things today. We're going to start by talking through all of the major trade deadline trades. We're going to have a discussion here. We're going to talk about Tony Pollard, of course. We might get to a few other things, but we'll see how much time allows for. What trade do you want to talk about first here in the NFL trade deadline?
I just want to remind everyone, this is a 1 hour podcast this week.
We'll see about that.
So
although I do want to try and make this 1 hour. I have things to do, but I think that it's one of those things. Like, did you ever set an alarm that's like a fake alarm? It's like if you really need to get up by 7, you see set alarm at 6:30.
Yeah.
Right. Like, basically what I mean is this won't be a 2 hour show.
Well, It might be.
So we're going to do 1 hour.
I'm not going to
probably an hour and a half. Probably an hour and a half.
The masses voted, and they voted for more. We want some more.
And we respect the masses.
Listen to the masses.
We listen to the masses. Okay, you didn't answer this. So we're going to start off with the trade that was technically not a trade deadline trade, but was at least trade deadline adjacent. It was a trade that happened last week, and it was Kadarius Toney, a.k.a. Young Joka, going to the Kansas City Chiefs. And so that, of course, affects Kadarius Toney. That potentially affects Sky Moore, aka Sky Less, and also, potentially impacts the rest of the Giants. I think that the word they're trying to find is receiving core to describe that collection of bodies. Let's start with Toney himself, the man that was moved. He gets moved.
Let's start with the player most impacted. I want to talk about how this affects Patrick Mahomes.
Okay, so it moves him from the 102 in Dynasty to the 102 in Dynasty next.
Yeah. It's completely irrelevant for Patrick Mahomes.
Are you one of those Patrick Mahomes 101 people? Are you like Cooper, or do you have him as the 102?
No,
or the 103. Okay, I think I have him as the 103. I think I'd rather.
I wouldn't even hate him as the 103. Who do you have a 102 then?
I have Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I was gonna say I might have Lamar ahead of him. I'm not sure. They'd be. It's a flip a coin. I'll take whichever one's left.
Exactly. That aside, are we gonna talk about Young Joka?
Yeah, I think we should. How do you feel?
You're buying? It's definitely like an upgrade, obviously. I mean, like, he was 2 weeks ago, he was faking a hamstring injury, slash having a hamstring injury, slash something associated with his hamstring. He was probably looking into record contracts rather than NFL careers. And basically, he hadn't played the entire year.
Time out, because you just said record contracts, and I saw a hilarious tweet, like, must have been around the time of the trade, stating that he has more songs on Spotify than he has receptions in the NFL. And I don't think there's anything more beautiful than that. Good for him. What a chance Kadarius.
I mean, it's really good that he has a side hustle going on, for sure. No, so Kadarius Toney, we know the deal on Toney. Like, he did not play very much in his first year. When he did play, he earned 1 million targets, and he had a couple of games that were really impressive. He's a really great yards after the catch player. There's a lot of questions around his ability to be a real full-time wide receiver and more than just a gadget player. this year I thought he was a really fun upside bet to make coming into the year. And, he gets immediately injured in training camp, barely plays the first couple games, and then injured once again. So we basically get nothing. Certainly an upgrade. The thing with Kansas City, it's like a weird wide receiver room in that there's a ton of bodies, but none of them are super imposing. So it's something where if someone can rise to the top, you have that opportunity. I mean, I'm buying or I'm selling, really depending on what the price is. Like I could see a kind of a vast array of how people feel from league to league. If someone wants to offer me like a mid 2 and I have the opportunity to get out of Tony, who was a mid 2 in the first place, for basically what I paid after 2 years of mostly doing nothing, like I think you just kind of have to take that at this point. That being said, like I'm not going to sell him for a 3, like I think he has a decent degree of upside. He's never been on the field and not gotten a bunch of targets, and he now goes to a really cool offense. So
I'm perplexed as why you would want to trade him for a mid 2, because I heard today that the 2023 rookie wide receiver class is actually weak.
That's a good point.
So why would you want to trade him for a 2023 second when you're getting a weak wide receiver?
That is a good question. I mean, ultimately, what really determines the draft class is the quarterbacks and the running backs. Those are the positions. Well, quarterback really is the position of scarcity. Running back, to some extent, is a position of scarcity, or at the very least, it's a position of perceived scarcity, such that the bar for being good and having value and being able to resell them is just way lower than it is at wide receiver. So once you get past those running backs, wide receivers, I mean, that was the problem with the 22 class. I like the 22 class. The problem was that we were taking fucking wide receivers already by the 102 and the 103. In a normal class, you're taking Drake London's and Garrett Wilson's, the 1-6 and the 1-7, and then we're feeling great all the way through the rest of the first round, and we're not taking Jahan Dotson's at the 111, right? Sure. I think 2023 is going to be lovely because all of the wide receivers that are, as the kids say, mid, we'll be taking them at the 1-2 turn. So it's going to be fine because we're going to have a bunch of running backs.
I think there's this like cycle that happens every year, and it's like a year out, there's just rainbows and butterflies everywhere, and you're like, every prospect is going to be amazing. And then in their draft year, people like start nitpicking, and they're like, well, this guy's draftable, let's watch him. And they're like, oh, no, he stepped with his left foot, he stepped with his right, his hands were upside down when he caught that ball, they should have been right ways up. And they nitpick at these little plays that don't really matter. And then we end up with like this mid-season lull where we're like, I don't know, the class maybe isn't that good. And then the draft approaches and everybody falls back in love. And at the end of the day, like I just want them to produce and get draft capital. And then I'm pretty happy. All other things equal, I'm pretty happy. And we always have these guys that crop up in the draft process that we've never even heard of, that suddenly are drafted in round 2, sometimes even in round 1. And I have a hard time believing that the 2023 class has weak wide receivers. I think they have medium wide receiver in terms of like quality of depth.
Why have you already derailed the show sheet? We were talking about Kadarius Toney. Now
because you're talking about I'm going to trade him for a mid-second. And I was like, would you? Because this class sucks. And it doesn't. And anyway.
So you would trade Toney for a mid-second?
I would happily trade Toney for a mid-second. Would you trade
Toney for a late second?
Yeah, I would.
Would you trade Toney for an early third?
No, absolutely not. Because a late second may not be a late second by the time we get to the end of the season. And usually we're going to get some good prospects in the middle of a second round in a medium quality class. Right. This is a medium to high quality class across the board, like not just looking at wide receivers. So I'm pretty confident that I'm going to have a very exciting prospect in the middle of the second round. No. And there's a chance that these guys fall to the late second. It happens all the time. And
I think there's a chance for this to be like a 2020 style draft where we're drafting guys like T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk in the middle of the second round. Like that would be like, those were really good, like mid-second round bets.
And Brandon
Higgins
Ayuk,
especially, but even like Ayuk and Shenault, like obviously Shenault didn't work out, but like Ayuk and Shenault were like very like reasonable bets to be making, and you could get them at like 2.7, 2.8.
And Brandon Ayuk was a nothing at this point of the season. He really didn't like rise until he went to the what's the Senior Bowl?
Senior Bowl.
What's
the
Senior
Did you say what's the Senior Bowl? Yeah, it is in fact the Senior Bowl.
He left after like one practice because he was like, I'm a first round pick. See you later. And somebody was like, oh yeah, he's better than N'Keal Harry at this point. And everybody's like, what? And then N'Keal Harry ended up obviously not being good.
Yeah.
So that was not really, it was kind of a bit of a backhanded compliment. Like, oh, he's better than the worst player we've ever seen. Good for him.
Yeah.
Anyways, I would trade Tony for a late second. I would still even feel comfortable.
What about a 24 second?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I asked that because now I'm going to derail the show sheet. This is how these podcasts that start as an hour become not an hour. I have reached the point in time where I'm no longer trading for 23 firsts, and this somewhat applies to second. Now, I'm not saying like I'm not interested. If someone's like, I want to trade you my 23 first, like I'm not turning them away, but they're not the number one target for me anymore. I am pivoting to a part where at this point in time, the only scenario really where I'm likely getting 23 firsts is contenders that have other bad teams as first round picks that want to trade them to me. Outside of that specific scenario, in which I'm still not getting a ton of upside because they're trading that pick with now knowledge. Like now early picks are fully priced as early picks, because if someone's like, I'm trading you this pick of a 2-6 team, they're going to make me pay for it. Like it's sick of a 2-6 team. Right.
Yeah.
And then the late first, it's like, that's cool at all. I mean, I still want late first in this 2023 class, but it's not as much upside. At this point in time, I'm mostly targeting 24 firsts because they are far cheaper. People are more willing to trade them. And that's where you have the opportunity to buy a first that the guy thinks is late and actually it ends up early. That's where I'm getting more excited. And I would apply some of that same logic to a second. Like, especially the second. Because if you're on the clock in the late first in 2021, it probably still won't be that hard to trade a late first in 2023 for a 24 first and maybe even an extra throw in. It's really hard to do that in seconds. Like people know that the difference between the early second and the late second is usually good bets and totally speculative bets. So if someone's like, I'll give you a late, if someone's like, I'll give you my second and their record is like 6-2 or something, I would say, I'll take your 24 second. Like I would just rather have the 24 second.
So I agree. And yeah, I think one of the easiest, simplest dynasty hacks in all the world is trade for the draft picks the furthest away that you can and just bide your time, because those draft picks are going to end up way higher than the person who traded them was valuing them at, and or B, you're just going to sit on them and they're just going to keep accruing value. So it's simple. So what I'm hearing from you though is that you're pretty much out on Kadarius Toney. Like,
yeah, I'm not hold meme. I mean, I have a lot of Kadarius Toney, so maybe I should start actually trying to shop him. I decided to take the approach of trying to let people come to me just to see what would happen. I didn't want to be the guy desperately flinging around offers after he got traded to the Chiefs. I just think that makes you look kind of like a beta. But so far, people have not been knocking down my door to get my Tonys. So. So we'll see. Maybe the offers are coming in, but maybe I'll start sending some out too. I think that the main thing, what you can do with a guy like Toney, if you do want to buy, and for the record, I would not be wanting to buy at this point at more than speculative prices. That being said, if he does work out, because people won't take my shares, I'll still be victory lapping it. But I think what I would probably want to do is, like, if you do want Toney, you can't just be like, I'll send you this late too for Toney. Like, I would say yes, but in all honesty, if that's what you want to pay, that most people might just tell you to fuck off. And especially if you like try and send a third, they're absolutely going to tell you to fuck off. Mm-hmm. What I would do is like find the Toney manager, figure out a deal entirely separate to Kadarius Toney that you want to work out, and go back and forth with them, and then be like, okay, would you add Toney to this? And then they might say yes, because they might be like, oh, this guy that I was like getting ready to cut 2 weeks ago, I can use him to accomplish a deal that I want. Yeah, sure. I'll be willing to do that. And you might get him in a more cost-effective way than if you just like walk up to the person and be like, hi, I actually want Kadarius Toney. Knock, knock, knock on the door. That's usually not going to work. And then similarly, I think if you're selling Kadarius Toney and you're not able to just get that round 2 pick, you know, what might be a more beneficial outcome is you talk larger deal and you're going back and forth and you're like, I can't really give you a 2, but I'd give you Toney. And maybe they're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Right. I'll just sort of ascribe that value that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, like I'm basically out on Toney. I sure there's upside there if he ends up hitting, because he's playing with Patrick Mahomes, and there's always upside with Patrick Mahomes. But what I really wanted to get out of you was that you're not buying in on Toney, which means that we're leaving a candle on for Sky Moore.
Just a small candle. Would you rather have Toney or Sky straight up in Dynasty? I think that's probably, I would bet the community is pretty 50-50 on this one. I think
the community is going to be Kadarius Toney by a landslide, because the Chiefs have indicated that they want Kadarius Toney, and they already had Sky Moore, and they still felt the need to go and get Kadarius Toney. So I got to think that they have their internal preference is Kadarius Toney.
I mean, I think Sky. Well, so the way I would view it is like I think that this would be like my favorable view of things for Sky, but I also think that it happens to be a true view of things. I think their view on Sky is like, honestly, I think that we ascribe too much predetermination to teams. Like, think about how you view some of your dynasty teams, right? Like, you probably view like your starters, your core pieces this year, and then your bench, you probably don't be like, I have this guy pegged for this role next year. I have this guy pegged for this role. It's like, oh, and then I have a bunch of young guys on my bench and we'll see what hits, right? Like that's how you look at your dynasty teams. That's probably how they look at this wide receiver room now. They look at
That's
it
what I think.
Right? They look at it and they're like, we have Juju for this year. And I don't think they're going to re-sign him because think about what they did this spring, right? They were like, we're going to make a bet that we're not going to need Tyreek Hill, who's one of the best wide receivers in the football, because we have Reed and we have Mahomes. Our comparative advantage is that we have one of the best offensive schemers in the NFL. We have the best quarterback in the NFL, so we can create efficient offense without having to pay a wide receiver a bunch of money. We're just going to get guys that work in specific roles, and we're going to figure it out. And Juju has worked enough for them. They're not going to not give Tyreek Hill $25 million a year just to give Juju $15 million a year. So I think that he most likely walks. And then they're looking at like Hardman. He's at the end of his deal. You know, maybe they extend him, maybe not. MVS, he's cuttable after this year. Maybe they retain him, maybe they don't. I think that they're just looking at it and saying, like, we don't know what our wide receivers are next year, but we have Sky Moore. We liked him. You know, maybe he's a guy next year. Maybe he's not, which is fair. He's done nothing to prove that he is a guy. And they're like, okay, Tony's an interesting player. We'll give up a third and a sixth for him, and we'll see what he can do. Maybe something, maybe nothing. Like that's what I think. I think they're just looking at these guys and they're like, we'll see what they can contribute. I think this year they're probably mostly going to be Juju and MVS as their main two. They're going to keep rotating in Hardman. They're going to rotate in Tony. Maybe they'll rotate in Scott. I think he might be healthy and active though, because he doesn't provide special teams value anymore. And then in 2023, I think it's a different situation. They're just like, well, then we have these other guys. Like that's kind of how I view it. I don't think that they know necessarily who their guys are after this year.
Yeah, no, I that's exactly my take on it. It's like, hey, you know what? They traded for Kadarius Toney. They probably like Kadarius Toney more today. I think that's fair. I could see Kadarius Toney being active on game day and Sky Moore being inactive on game day.
Yeah, he'll definitely be active on game day because he's going to return punts.
And then next year, though, who's the better wide receiver? That's what matters. And they'll be competing on the same practice field, and we'll see. And it could be Sky Moore, it could be Kadarius Toney, it could be somebody completely different. They might take a first-round wide receiver next year. They probably should.
Yeah.
And yeah, so such is life. But Kadarius Toney right now on Keep Trade Cut is 34.41, and Sky Moore is 27.38. So according to the masses that are voting on these polls, Kadarius Toney is smoking.
What's a mid two on Keep Trade Cut?
It's like 3,500. So
so he's like right on. Okay,
so
we'll see. I'd like to liquidate some Tonys then. Yeah, I would like to do that.
And Sky Moore is more like an early third on Keep Trade Cut. So like at an early
I would definitely buy Sky Moore for an early third.
I was gonna say I'm not selling him for an early third. I'm buying for a third, any third. Like this year.
Yeah, I mean it would still take to me like an early to mid second to reroll Sky, which is not being offered outside of probably extreme circumstances. So at this point, I'm holding Sky, and I'm probably even buying Sky. I would send a third round pick for Sky Moore in any circumstance. I mean, a third round pick, like I'm comfortable spending a third round pick for like a spot start running back, like if I need to in a certain spot. I'm definitely comfortable rolling the dice with Sky Moore. So
like I have this whole process, you could call it, where we don't buy face planners. Right. And normally I stick to that process because we can re-roll the face planners at a reasonable loss in value. It's okay to sell N'Keal Harry, who you took at 102 for a late first. I feel like that's a fine trade. We're trading a player that's probably not going to hit for a player that's probably going to hit. By the time we get to third round picks, these players aren't probably going to hit anymore. So to trade Sky, who is probably not going to hit, for another player who is probably not going to hit, doesn't really make sense to me. I'm just going to stick to my priors when they get to third round picks or less and let it ride. And maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't. It doesn't matter. I'm probably not getting a worthwhile prospect in the third round anyways.
Right. So, and Rondale Moore is good. So the face planter theory is over now.
Rondale Moore isn't. He was always good, but he's not going to hit. That's the difference.
That's true. He's not going to hit, but
he's not going to be a top 24 wide receiver. He's a good wide receiver though, and that's what I was pushing back on this fake face planter thing. Like when you looked at Rondale Moore across the face planter spectrum, he was like the best player in every metric I look at.
Right, because he's still good. He's like out there contributing. You can start him in the flex if you need to. It doesn't matter. But if he's on your team, you can start him in the flex anytime you want.
Like I said, he was never.
I've played him in DFS like every week this year. Like he's a player.
Off the buy list, put him onto the sell list because he's never going to matter, and he's probably not going to hit top 24, and he's probably not going to see a huge value gain at this point. So there's really no reason to go and buy Rondale Moore. But that doesn't make him a bad NFL player.
Speaking of that,
the league next year.
That's actually a deal that I did do. Well, this was now unfortunately before he was traded to the Chiefs, but like 3 weeks ago, I traded Kadarius Toney for Rondale Moore.
Oh yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, this is like 3 weeks ago.
That's a player who's not going to be useful potentially next year for a player that could be useful next year.
Yeah, I mean that also is a nice short-term difference where I was like, I thought it was kind of a toss-up, but I just had a lot of buys that week, and I was like, if I don't start Rondale, I'm starting KJ Hamler. So I kind of looked at it. I was like, well, it's kind of the same, but in one scenario B, I don't have to start KJ Hamler. So. Speaking of face planter or bulletproof players, rip KJ Hamler. Does this have any impact on Wan'Dale or Juju anybody else? I don't really think that it does because like there was no other Giants wide receivers anyway, so I don't think that like Wan'Dale's problem was target competition.
No.
Like whatever. He had a really strong first game in a limited role. He had a really strong second game in a larger role. He didn't really do anything this game, but I don't know. It's rookies. They ebb and flow. I think still a strong start overall for Wan'Dale.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like this doesn't change anything on Wan'Dale. I completely agree with you. When we were looking at Wan'Dale and thinking, oh my goodness, I wonder if Wan'Dale is going to be good. It wasn't, oh my gosh, I hope that he doesn't get alphaed by Kadarius Toney. Like that wasn't the narrative at all.
Right.
And therefore him leaving is still like, man, who cares? That was a player that wasn't going to have a material impact on Wan'Dale's success.
Right. And then none of the other wide receivers are good enough for it to matter that Kadarius Toney is leaving. So it doesn't matter. Slayton and Galladay, all these guys are total bums. And then I guess the other one is Juju. I mean, I don't think it impacts Juju a whole ton the rest of the season, but I think that it does decrease the chances that he resigns, which I guess is bad for his dynasty value because he's already in the best place he could possibly be in.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I think it was the Patreon in the Discord, maybe. For those that are listening for the first time, it's patreon.com/bulletproofff. If you would like to sign up and join the Discord, get the rankings, so on and so forth. Anyways, talking about Juju, I can't remember where it was. And we were talking about, I think it was in my thread when I was going through my like A-list buys coming into the season. I was like, yeah, this one kind of worked out. Like he's scoring about 14 or 13 points per game. It's like, man, whatever. And he wasn't really all that expensive. So I guess it's fine, but I'm just out now. Like, I felt like there was a chance that he was actually greater than a 20% target share player because he was playing with Chase Claypool and he's playing with Deontay. And before Claypool got there, Juju was playing injured. And I was like, there's a chance. Now he's playing with MVS and Mecole Hardman, and he's still a 20% target share player. He is what he is. He's only ever going to have a starter-esque existence in the best offenses in the world. And if it's not this one, I don't know which one he's going to end up in. So he's probably toast after this point.
Yeah, he was a rare guy where I was like okay with him at cost in Dynasty. I wasn't really targeting him that much in Dynasty. I was really into him in redraft and best ball just because I thought he was so speculative. And he's been fine. He hasn't been like a great pick. He hasn't been a terrible pick in those formats. Yeah. He's been fine. And definitely, in Dynasty, I think this is probably the best year of the rest of his career.
Yeah. He's not going to have more than a 20% target share, and he's probably not going to be in a better situation. So this is peak Juju.
And it's never a 20% target share that's downfield. It's like a 20% target share plus a 20% air yard share. Like that's just who he is.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the next one. Let's talk about TJ Block and some. That's my nickname for him. It's honestly not even like that good of a nickname or like that accurate of a nickname because he actually does run a pretty high route participation. But I just really enjoy the name because he's just so mediocre.
Well, here's the thing: you have a bad nickname for TJ Hawkinson, and you also have a bad Twitter handle. So maybe you should stop giving nicknames.
No, TJ Block and some is a good nickname.
Oh, it isn't.
Yeah, it is.
It's awful.
It's really
it doesn't
good.
Make sense. He's running all the routes. What are you talking about?
Well, otherwise he'd be
TJ
TJ Block and
nickname?
Lot. You'd be TJ Block and Lot. Instead, it's just TJ Block and some.
Block and some. Okay. All right. What do you think? I
don't care about TJ Hawkinson. I couldn't care less about TJ Hawkinson. There's no good reason to value TJ Hawkinson in Dynasty above Greg Dulcich.
Above who?
Greg Dulcich, who's a top 6 tight end in Dynasty.
Never heard of him. All right. Yeah, no,
Can we victory lap that, by the way? We stood here a month ago before you'd ever played an NFL game, and you said that you'd rather have Jelani Blitz over Greg Dulcich in Dynasty. And through 3 games, Greg Dulcich has completely balled out and is now a top 5 dynasty tight end.
I'm pretty sure that Jelani Woods has 3 touchdowns and Dulcich doesn't. So I win.
Yeah, that's certainly a way to go. But no, TJ Hawkinson in mini, I don't know. He's just he's not. He doesn't matter. Like, very few tight ends matter. TJ Hawkinson is one of the better of the tight ends that doesn't matter, but he still does not matter. Like, he's a catch and fall down tight end. He's not dynamic. And the only way that kind of tight end matters is if you're Zach Ertz on the Eagles and you're able to get like a 28% target share. He's never going to get that. First of all, because he couldn't get that when there was literally nobody around him because he's not that good. And then now there's the best wide receiver in the NFL, or at least one of the 3 or 4 best wide receivers in the NFL around him. Adam Thielen is also there for at least this year, and who knows how much longer he'll keep doing his thing. But for now, at least, he's probably a better target earner than TJ Block and some. And yeah, he's the rich man's Tyler Higbee, I guess. If I had TJ Hawkinson, what I would do right now is I would trade him for Greg Dulcich straight up. I would trade him for David Njoku straight up.
You wouldn't you don't have to stop that. You're way overpaying for those guys.
No, you do have to. I actually sent out Darren Waller for Greg Dulcich straight in like a handful of leagues, and I was declined in every single opportunity.
You're an absolute maniac, and then I cannot believe that you would do that to Darren Waller.
I mean, Greg Dulcich is like, this isn't the Greg Dulcich section.
How dare you?
But we're talking about a guy who is 18 yards per reception in college. He's an offline, downfield tight end option. He has a similar athletic profile to Mark Andrews. He had a similar deployment profile to Mark Andrews, had the same draft capital as Mark Andrews. We have a guy now here who comes into the league similar to Mark Andrews, immediately starts producing efficiently, immediately starts producing in a downfield way. I mean, this could be the next superstar tight end. You need to get in on this. You need to get in on Greg Dulcich. You need to get Greg Dulcich on every one of your dynasty teams. This is a potential difference-making asset.
Okay. We'll buy some Greg Dulcich.
Yeah,
he's actually
TJ Hawkinson.
He's actually really not that expensive. He's like a late second on Keep Trade Cut, and Keep Trade Cut is a hype machine, and he is hyped. So you are probably getting him at some pretty fair prices, and I think that's fine. I mean, anyway, TJ Hawkinson. I was going to give you the absolute perfect player of what to expect when expecting TJ Hawkinson.
Is it Tyler Higbee?
No, it's not. It's not Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee is not the same thing at all. What we were looking at is a player who popped as a rookie, did impressive things, and then did impressive things again, and then did impressive things again, but never actually put it all together. And just like kind of had like a 10 to 12 point.
Oh, it's Hunter Henry.
It's Hunter Henry. That's exactly who he is. He's just a guy who's going to catch 18, 20% target shares. Yeah. He's going to get, 10 to 12 points per season. Like TJ Hawkinson right now is tight end 4, I think, in
because he had like 140-point game.
Yeah, dude's a stud. He's got gray hair. He's looking like a Viking. He's playing for the Vikings. It's all making sense. I really have no interest in rostering TJ Hawkinson at this point. If you can get out of TJ Hawkinson for anything that has even a remotely interesting ceiling, I think you simply have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, sorry for derailing the thing with the Dulcich, but like you couldn't be more correct in that like, if you don't have a tight end who matters, the worst thing you can do is roster the most expensive tight end who doesn't matter.
Yeah. You should be able to take your TJ Hawkinson and go and get Jelani Walker plus a whole bunch more and just hope that perfect 10 Raz score manifests itself in more than just 3 touchdowns in like 4 games. So just go get Jelani Walker, go get Greg Dulcich, and it's going to be great. We're going to win championships, or we're not, and we're going to just trade them in 2 years when they don't emerge. And it's fine.
Definitely not interested in TJ Hawkinson. James Mitchell, I'm very interested in. James Mitchell.
Before you get into James Mitchell, I need you to know that he's actually not number 2 on the depth chart.
Right. It's
number 2 on the depth chart is a guy who I never heard of. I didn't go look him up, and I spend countless hours looking up players to have never heard of Brock Wright before. Block Wright. Yes, of course. The guy literally had like 6 receptions his entire college career. Why is he ahead of James Mitchell on the Lions depth chart? And also, is he actually? And also, I don't care because I don't want him, and nobody should ever want him. That would be like speculating on Drew Sample. Like,
Yeah,
that would be like the worst thing you could do.
Right, Jonathan Scott Connor is like the only person who just won't let Drew Sample die.
So like, what? Scott Connor likes Drew Sample?
Yeah, he's a Drew Sample truther.
It's because he's a Bengals fan.
Yeah, and he likes his RAS score. He's like really into Drew Sample.
Does he have a high RAS score, Drew Sample?
I mean, I think so.
I don't think so.
Drew Sample size.
He's no Jelani Walker.
No, nobody is. Neither is James Mitchell.
That's actually true. That was actually true. Nobody is Jelani Walker. He is a unicorn of the position.
That's true.
You somehow hate.
Yeah, he sucks. So another tight end that's better than Jelani Woods in this draft class was James Mitchell.
Oh, yeah. Did I call him Jelani Walker? That was embarrassing. Jelani Woods.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, so James Mitchell, in his second and third years, he was immediately injured and he barely played in his entire fourth year. So that's why his fourth year stats basically don't exist because he was immediately hurt. I know this because he was on my college fantasy teams and it was painful. His profile basically is it's worse, but his production profile is in the same bucket generally over his first couple of years as Greg Dulcich, Trey McBride, Isaiah Likely. He's in that crew. He is producing above thresholds. He got up over 1.5 yards per team pass attempt in his third year before he ultimately succumbs to injury in his fourth year. What's especially interesting about him is when you look at yards per reception, he was one of the downfield tight ends. He was not just a guy who is running little stick routes. He's a guy that's actually running seam routes. It's actually able to be deployed dynamically. The only tight ends in this class who produced multiple seasons above 15 yards per reception were James Mitchell, Greg Dulcich, Isaiah Likely. These are the types of tight ends that we want to be targeting. These are the tight ends that have the ability to do more than catch and fall down. These are the tight ends that can get open in the seam. These are the tight ends that get deployed off the line of scrimmage, out into the slot. I really like James Mitchell's profile. His athletic profile is total trash, and he didn't play his fourth year, and his draft capital is trash as a result of those two things. But in terms of what he's actually been able to do on the football field, it's interesting. It's a lot more interesting than anything Brock Wright has done. And so if you're making a speculative ad, definitely make the speculative ad on James Mitchell, especially in a dynasty format, not on Brock Wright. What say you?
Yeah, I just checked out James Mitchell one more time in my database for my prospecting of tight ends, and I think that targeting anyone other than James Mitchell would be a tremendous error in judgment. And just go get James Mitchell. Honestly, I would make him kind of a priority ad.
Yeah, I'm spending really pretty real fab on James Mitchell.
And if he was not a terrible prospect, he would have been an awesome prospect. If he got draft capital, he'd have been a really good prospect.
It realistically, and the thing is too, what I kind of like about it, once we know that a guy does not get draft capital, in terms of reasons why they didn't get draft capital, getting injured in your first game of your last season and missing the whole year is one of my preferred reasons, right? It's easy enough to tell yourself a story of if he plays his fourth year, maybe he gets drafted higher. I mean, the other reason he doesn't get drafted higher, he runs a 4.77. That's bad, but it's not the thing is so I don't think that James Mitchell probably has a super elite ceiling because he's really slow. But I mean, if you get James Mitchell off waivers and he's a legitimate low end tight end one, then that's a massive win.
Yeah, no, he doesn't have to be great. He's so free that all we're looking for is a value gain. And if he's going to be the starting tight end for the Detroit Lions and their high powered offense with Jared Goff under center, he's not going to have to do a lot to turn a little tidy profit. And you can get out of him and go and get yourself a Jelani Woods and a potential true difference maker that could absolutely wreck the league, a la a Jimmy Graham, or who are the other super premium high RAS players that are tight ends? Do you remember? There's lots.
I'm not sure. I've always been a little bit more on the production side for tight ends than most people.
You shouldn't.
I care about RAS, but I care about RAS, but I care about RAS, but what I'm really trying to look at is how are tight ends getting deployed? What are they producing? And specifically, how are they producing? Are they getting deployed off the line of scrimmage? Are they getting seam routes? Are they being used in yards after catch situations? That's usually what I'm looking for more in tight ends. That's why Greg Dulcich was my number one priority tight end in this draft class. And he's the best tight end in this draft class, it turns out. So.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it, and it's Kyle Pitts is pretty up there, 9.6.
Yeah. Noah Fant, I imagine, is up there.
Noah
Vernon
Fant,
Davis, for sure.
Vernon Davis.
Mike Gesicki, I bet, is pretty high.
Gesicki, 9.98. Jordan Cameron, who had a pretty productive day 3 career with Well, not super productive. I think he only had like one good season, but I think he got hurt and that ended his career.
Is Gerald Everett, is he up there somewhere?
He's surprisingly not, but that's because he's small.
Oh, okay.
He's only like 6'3" or 6'2" or something.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
He's pretty athletic, but it just didn't come with the type of size that pops in the tight end Raz spectrum. Like even Evan Ingram, who is like an absolute freak, is only a 9.16 in Raz.
Oh, okay.
Because he's only 6'3", 234.
Right.
Like
I mean, Evan Ingram's really a slot wide receiver. He's like smaller than Chase Claypool.
Like Dalton Keene, one of the best tight end prospects we've ever seen. 9.34. Dude's a stud. Can't believe it didn't work out. Still shocked. Thanks for nothing, Bill. For those that don't know, Dalton Keene is the worst tight end prospect we've ever seen that qualified for the Bulletproof distinction because Bill Belichick decided to take him 3 rounds ahead of his expected draft capital, launching him into a Bulletproof. Just like, come on, Bill. Don't do this to me. Anyways, the moral of the story is that Jelani Woods is one of a kind, and you should have him as well as Greg Dulcich and like all these like guys, whatever. They're just so free. Like this is why I feel like I made a tremendous error in rookie drafts this year when I ranked the tight ends like in the mid-second. And looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? That was
I told you that was a mistake. Yes.
Yeah, and I caught up.
I literally like honestly progression. I honestly think like this problem. It's kind of sad because like I obviously like massive L on taking Sky Moore over Chris Olave, but I'm praying that Greg Dulcich really does turn out because like I would say my best take of draft season was absolutely ignore Jelani Woods, only take Trey McBride at ADP. The only tight end I care about at cost in this class is Greg Dulcich. Because man, he's good.
Jelani Woods wasn't ranked high, was he? In rookie
ranked
draft?
Too high for me. He was ranked ahead of Greg Dulcich.
He must have been in like round 3 or 4.
Yeah, he was going round 3. I was taking Brian Robinson, Romeo Doubs, Greg Dulcich.
Yeah. Anyways, the moral of the story is
we don't really care about TJ Hawkinson, and we want to add James Mitchell off waivers.
Yeah, we talked about James Mitchell for entirely too long. So let's move on.
Hines to Buffalo. Okay, now we're going to talk really quickly. This time we're actually going to talk really quickly about a bunch of running backs that don't really matter. Pick one that you have a take on. Hines goes to the Buffalo Bills. Zach Moss goes to the Indianapolis Colts. Chase Edmonds to the Denver Broncos. Jeff Wilson Jr. to the Miami Dolphins. Pick any one of those 4 that you care about in the slightest.
I'm going to pick one of those 4 that are not in one of those 4, and I want to talk about James Cook.
There you go.
He literally got tanked already. We're halfway through his rookie year, and they're trading real assets to go and get a freaking running back to replace this guy. 6 weeks into his rookie year, 8 weeks into his rookie year. How many weeks are we in? Week 8?
Week 8. It's pretty embarrassing.
That's so bad. And you took him in the first round of Dynasty drafts.
In a handful of Dynasty leagues, people traded their 23 first round pick to go into the 22 first at the late first to get James Cook. People were like, I will forego the 23 first round to get James Cook now. I need James Cook now. I need James Cook.
I can't wait to see what people are going to pay for Nyheim Hines now that he's in this high-powered offense.
James Cook went at the 103 in my home Dynasty draft.
He went at 104 in mine. Because my home Dynasty league doesn't draft until like August.
So same as ours.
Like I used to think that you can make so much money on drafting in May because like only the sharps know what's going on.
No, August is where you want to be.
August is way better because only the sharps know what's going on, and you get these fucking ADPs that are just outrageously bad.
Yeah, I mean, because Jamar Chase was at the 109 in our home league rookie draft last year because it was the end of August and he couldn't catch a ball, so he went at the 109. But Jim Cook went at the 103 this year. James Cook is like dead before he even lived, which is pretty wild. It honestly, like, I feel bad for him because they literally drafted another running back who plays the exact same, or traded for another running back that plays the exact same role that he does, and they never even give him a chance to fail in that role. Like, it wasn't like they gave him a chance to be their passing down back and he was bad. They just I guess saw him in practice. They're like, nah wave. Like, they just nah waved James Cook entirely, and they went out and got Nyheim Hines. It's also, I will say, like, it is just super strange. What is the Bills' obsession with finding a dump-off repository? Like, it's not that important of a position. Like, I promise you, it's really cool when you have an actual running back who also catches passes really well, because that creates like versatility. That's also for an offense. You know what's like a position that does not matter? Is like the situational passing satellite back. It's not an important position. Honestly, I think if anything, it's like bad that NFL teams even use them because it just telegraphs the plays of their team. I would rather play a less good pass catching back on pass downs because it potentially tells the other team we might run the ball. So I think they're still better to use not that guy. They are freely available. I mean, you could assign Dontrell Hilliard for nothing. They already have Duke Johnson. Literally, what is the difference between any of these guys and Duke Johnson? Like, he's on their practice squad, just chilling. He's the same guy as these people, but yet they like were so set on this. Like, they wanted to sign J.D. McKissic to like real money, and then J.D. McKissic, like Washington was like so scared of losing fucking J.D. McKissic that they're like, you have to come back, so we'll make you our third string running back by week 8. And then Buffalo was like, oh no, we lost J.D. McKissic. We lost this converted wide receiver from Arkansas State who's never done anything to contribute to offensive success. We must now spend a round 2 pick on James Cook, who probably they could have drafted in round 4. And they were like, we have to get this guy because our offense just cannot function. Our best offense in the league cannot function without a piece that we've never had. We've never thrown to running backs, but our offense simply can't function if we can't dump off to some loser running back who's 190 pounds on third down. How will we function? And then they finally got this guy. And in the summer, they were like, no, we're not going to use him. We're going to use Zach Moss. And then they found out what they found out every year, which is that they try to use Zach Moss. And like, oh man, Zach Moss, he sucks. And it's like, yeah. You knew that the other years that you tried to use Zach Moss, who always sucked. And then they finally used James Cook this week against Green Bay, and he was like good. He like caught a ball like 40 yards down the field, and he like made people miss. And they're like, no, we can't do it. This guy might be a real running back potentially. We need Naeem Hines. we need to get this guy. It is insane. I don't understand. Like the Bills are such a smart organization, and they have an absolute complex with these satellite backs. It's wild.
Can I be honest? Something that we didn't put on this show sheet that is like the most impactful of all of these running back moves is free Jonathan Taylor, man. Like, yeah,
that's a 2-minute drill now.
15% target share just freed up out of that backfield. Like right. Jonathan Taylor is probably going to play in all downs with no breathers at this point, and
he no longer has to lead block on their Wildcat goal line plays.
I mean, well, hey, you know what? It could be Zach Moss's role. Maybe this trade was actually orchestrated by the Colts. They're like, hey, Naeem, you're nothing. Zach Moss, though.
No, Naeem Hines asked to be traded.
Come on in, Zach. Let's go. And they're going to...
Hines asked out, and the Colts obliged.
What's that?
Hines asked out of the organization.
Yeah, I'd ask out too. They're giving all the carries to this non-generational running back. When they have Naeem Hines, just
that's they should be using Naeem Hines.
But like seriously, like the ceiling that we were always like, I don't know if it's ever going to happen for Jonathan Taylor. Like it could happen now. Like there's a projectable path here where he's Joe Mixon but good, and that's really exciting.
Right. Well, and he's Joe Mixon but playing on pass downs. Right. Like there's no Samaj P. Ryan. Yeah. Because Samaj P. Ryan plays all the same situations Naeem Hines does. It's just that he's so bad that we don't actually know that he plays. Like you have to watch the games to see that Samaj P. Ryan's on the field because they never feature him. But he is on the field.
He's like Ezekiel Elliott pre Tony Pollard.
Yeah, I mean Taylor could play. Taylor might play like 95% snap rate.
Yeah,
that's like play. Like pretty awesome.
People are down on Jonathan Taylor right now. I actually just traded one of my Jamar Chases, which was like the best pick I've ever made. And I got Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. in that trade. Yeah. So I just went all in on the Colts offense because of course I did.
You got it.
Let's go. And I got Jonathan Taylor, my like one Jonathan Taylor copy in all of the land. And now I'm excited because they just increased the ceiling exponentially by shipping Naeem Hines off to Buffalo, where the thing that really bothers me about this and like the Buffalo Bills' obsession with their third down pass catching back is they have freaking Jonathan Taylor, man. Or not Jonathan Taylor. They got Josh Allen.
Right.
They got Josh Allen's not going to throw. If you are taking Josh Allen,
or should he?
Your third down running back at 0 ADOT, you're an idiot. Don't do that.
Right. I mean, it's like the things that Josh Allen does well: throwing downfield bombs to Gabe Davis, throwing everywhere on the field to Stephon Diggs, throwing exclusively touchdowns to Dawson Knox, running dudes over on third down and when nothing's there. Like when nothing's there, the check down for Josh Allen is not, I'm going to throw it to my puny little running back. It's, oh yeah, I'm a literal buffalo and I will stampede over linebackers and convert first downs myself. It's so silly.
I've never heard him be called a buffalo before.
He runs like an actual buffalo. Like he's
just a giant monster who runs over people. I love it.
Yeah, it's awesome. So silly from the Bills. I mean, whatever. It's a 6th round pick, so I shouldn't like beat them too much. But it is like legitimately funny that James Cook is just over. What would be the most you would spend for James Cook? Like so I will say this: James Cook is probably super dead for life, but he is technically a rookie. 2nd round pick playing on the Bills, and like even if he's never anything, that still has like some sort of latent market excitement to it. I think that like may reappear one day. I don't know. I'm gonna sell my Benjamins for James Cook. That's what I'm gonna try.
So like what does that equal in draft picks? Are you giving a third for this?
No, I'm not giving up a third. I'm giving up Benjamin.
I'm not giving up a third. I'm gonna take my 3rd round pick. I'm gonna draft a day 3 running back next year, and next year's draft it's gonna have a better shot of producing than James Cook.
Yes, I will. I'm not moving my thirds. I would move like if I've
move a
clinched, if I've clinched a buy and my third is like going to be at the absolute earliest 3-9, I will move that third for James Cook, maybe, but probably not.
Maybe
because I could just draft. I was drafting Greg Dulcich there, and he's a lot better than James Cook. So
I feel like we often get players that are like not like good fantasy producers, but like they get some hype and you can cash them out for a second.
Right. I mean, look at the 3rd round this year. You could have easily cashed out, or at least in some leagues, like Brian Robinson rose to round 2 pick value. Romeo Doubs rose to round 2 pick value. Greg Dulcich is now round 2 pick value. Tyler Algier, I don't know where he's at, but he might be round 2 pick value, or at least like close-ish. Maybe at the very least, you could do like Algier plus a 3 for a 2, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's better bets in the universe than James Cook. I mean, people got excited about Zamir White for a week solely because the real player on the team played in the Hall of Fame game. People were trading 2nd round picks for Zamir White. He's like the worst running back prospect ever.
Yeah, it's a wild world out there. Okay, the other guys, Edmonds to Denver. Are you doing any of that? I have no interest in anyone involved.
I mean, it makes Latavius and Melvin Gordon even more useless, I guess, because it's just going to probably be a 3-way committee now.
I don't even want to talk about it. It's such a terrible nothingness of nothing.
It's just it's so like we lost the fact that we lost Javonte Williams and then this is what we get. Sad.
Yeah. Well, but Wilson to Miami, he's reunited with Mike McDaniel.
Mike McDaniel. Yeah, and what's more important about this is that I called it. And in fact, I have been so in tune.
What's most important about this is my enormous victory lap that doesn't matter. Go for it.
Well, I've just been so in tune with Mike McDaniel. It's actually hilarious. Like I put out a tweet or in like February, I was like running backs I expect Miami to sign for their outside zone scheme, and the first 2 names that I listed were Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert, and I was like, oh wow, like good job, Jacob. And then as soon as this deal happened, I was in a group chat with a bunch of my friends who play Dynasty, and they were like, oh, this means Miami is gonna get Hunt, like when they sent out Edmonds, and I was like, no, they're gonna get Jeff Wilson. And then immediately it happened, and I was like, yes. And then I don't know, he's probably going to be fine. Mostert has like been better than Edmonds, which is to say he's been better than the worst running back in the league this year. There was this poll, or not poll. There was a chart that Ben B. Baldwin, the RBS guy, posted that had rush yards over expectation charted on one side, and then like expected rush yards on the other side. So it was like the people with like the highest like expected rush yards, highest rush yards over expectation, whatever. And Edmonds, like I didn't even know that he was on the chart. He was like so far to the right where he had the highest expected rush yards per carry in the NFL, and then the lowest rush yards over expectation, like the most rush yards under expectation in the league. So he had the most expected of him, and he was accomplishing the least on his expectations. I mean, like I've kind of liked Chase Edmonds in the past. He's never been this bad. This is like actually crazy, but he's super dead. And the point is that Mostert, I don't think was actually so good that he outplayed him. It was just that Edmonds like played himself off the field. And so I don't know. Wilson's been better than Mostert this year by most advanced metrics. I think Mostert's still the guy that you'd prefer, but he also like breaks in half pretty easily. So I don't know. Jeff Wilson's kind of fun.
Yeah, he's maybe an RB2, and that could be fine, I guess. You could play him in your RB2 slot if you were, say, like a rebuilding team that didn't want to win. That'd be a perfect thing to do.
He's like a 0 RB guy. We can add him to the pile.
He's a 0 RB guy that is not going to matter, and I just have no interest in Jeff Wilson at all. If you could trade Jeff Wilson for like a Wilson and a third for a second, I would slam it.
Of course, I would just trade Wilson for a third.
Yeah, I would take a third for him. You're gone. Yeah. You've disappeared. The best days are spent, is what I've just learned. Those that are listening to the podcast right now, Jacob has disappeared. He has reappeared like a magician. He is Houdini. Okay.
Yeah, my computer was about to die, so I had to take my camera off and plug in my charge cord. But now I'm back. Yeah, Jeff Wilson, we don't care.
The gamble you made there. Gambling with the life of your computer in the midst of the podcast. I love it. Let's talk about another gambler. Calvin Ridley off to Jacksonville to play.
That was good. That was good. You're not usually that good. That was good.
I was on the fly. I was feeling it. Let's go.
Another gambler. That's good. Yeah, Calvin Ridley. I don't know. I have like a less interesting take here. Calvin Ridley is good. Calvin Ridley will play next year. That makes him a buy, but you probably can't buy as low as you could have before. Yeah, I think the most important thing is how you approach it. I wouldn't like offer for Calvin Ridley today, probably because people are excited. I would let it simmer for a couple weeks, and then I would go to the contenders in your league that have Calvin Ridley, and whatever their need is in a couple weeks, I would offer them something to fill that need. And then instead of like a second round pick, you should ask for Calvin Ridley as the compensation.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Calvin Ridley, you want on your team, but it's not urgent, and right now is the worst time to buy because there's news on him. You need to buy him when there's no news.
I do want to buy Trevor Lawrence, though, because he's coming off this horrendous performance. I think Trevor Lawrence has had an underrated underrated year too, in that he's been one of the best 10 quarterbacks between the 20s, and he's been like the worst in the red zone. And to me, that spells flukiness, and that spells like it's probably going to regress, where he's probably going to be a little bit worse between the 20s and a lot better in the red zone. And so I would expect that, as like fortune just sort of works its way out in terms of what is happening in the red zone. I mean, he's a guy that has at least the opportunity to accrue a ton of value. Like I view him almost like a Kenneth Walker in the sense that I'm pretty confident that he's good. I think that ultimately he doesn't run enough for me to want to hold super long on him. But like, look at where Herbert and Burrow and even Tua now get value. Like I think Lawrence is a safe bet where at some point things are going to be breaking well for him and he's going to get into that tier of quarterback. And so I don't mind storing value in him now. I'm trying to buy Trevor Lawrence. And I mean, all of a sudden, pretty good group of skill players. Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne. That's fun.
Just quickly off topic to really say sorry to Matt. Sorry, Matt. Hashtag sorry, Matt.
Yeah,
I tweeted something today that was like literally my most popular tweet in months. I can do these like threads that are like jam packed with things that actually impact whether or not you win your fantasy football league, or I can just tweet out literally the players on a team and get like 500 likes.
Jack Kavanaugh.
What a useless tweet this is. Why is anybody liking it? It was just like humorous to me that this was actually the Jags supporting cat or skill position players. And people just like ate it. It's 559 likes, and I posted it 8 hours ago. And I don't think I've ever posted anything that got 559 likes. Twitter, do better. That is completely useless, and it deserves no likes. It's not even funny. Like, there's really no point to this. I tweeted their depth chart, people. It's useless. Anyways, let's move on. Sorry, Matt. Quick side tangent. Made me laugh. Something that makes me laugh every single day is that Chase Claypool is the number 3 wide receiver in the world per him. This is a consensus opinion per him. And he got traded for a second-round pick, which is pretty steep compensation, even when considering top 3 wide receivers in the world. If you were to compare him
that's what DeAndre Hopkins got traded for, and he's one of the top 3 wide
Amari Cooper, total scrub, went for a 5th-round pick, not 3 or 4.
That trade looks just so epically hilarious every single day.
What an awful Dallas! You are an embarrassment to the world, and I hate you on a daily basis.
I mean, I'll say this though, like also awful on the teams, right? Like also, teams. Well, like every team that isn't the Browns that could have offered a 4th-round pick to get Amari Cooper. Like it's also bad on them, right? Like presumably, Chicago,
why didn't you offer them a 4th? Right. Why did you wait 6 months to go and pay a 2nd for Chase freaking Claypool?
Yes, and yes, I get the cap thing. Like I actually do. I'm not trying to be intentionally obtuse. I understand that Amari Cooper had a cap hit. Calvin Ridley is also going to have a cap hit. He's going to be going into his 5th-year option, and then he's going to have to get paid, right? So he just got a 2nd-round pick. Like Jacksonville could have just gotten Amari Cooper. They had a bunch of money to spend. They spent it on an off-ball linebacker, and they spent it on Christian Kirk, who's like, I guess Kirk, I don't know, is he worse than Amari Cooper? I think like in an NFL sense he is. They're kind of similar in fantasy. There were teams with cap space. The Indianapolis Colts definitely had the cap room that they could have gone and gotten Amari Cooper. So they would have had an actual second NFL wide receiver on their team that isn't fucking Paris Campbell.
What about Alec Pierce? Dude's a stud. He's a rookie. Let's go.
Yeah. Putting up some nice George Pickens-esque per route numbers. So, just a couple of the same player, being studly.
But here's the thing. Alec Pierce didn't have to deal with Chase Claypool, the top 3 wide receiver in the world. So you have to keep that in mind.
Anyway, every single trade that comes out does make the Amari Cooper trade look more and more ridiculous. And like, I've never even been a big Amari Cooper fan. But like he got so underrated, and honestly he got like underrated in fantasy because he was traded for so little is my take. Like this is the first year ever that Amari Cooper was underrated in fantasy, which is
I have never, well, I shouldn't say never. I really liked Amari Cooper, the prospect.
So good.
The first year, amazing, 1,000 yards as a rookie, dude's a stud, 4th overall pick. The sky's the limit.
He's like the TJ Hawkinson of wide receivers, actually.
Then he just stayed the exact same forever. and he's still basically the exact same, but the price went from like way up here, I don't know if you can see, to like here. And that matters. That's one of the things that really frustrates me, and maybe we'll talk about this later. But like when people are looking at takes and they're like, oh yeah, you got that wrong. And it's like, well, I mean, that was within the context of where that player was being drafted. I didn't like that player if they were drafted 3 rounds later. Right. I really like that player if they're drafted 3 rounds later. That's one that made sense. Anyways, we're off topic. Claypool. Okay, no, actually, let's get back on Dallas for a second because I just really want to talk about Dallas. Now that we're talking about Dallas. Dallas had.
We're going to talk about Dallas in a second because we're going to talk about.
No. This is better because it's Amari Cooper. We'll come back to Chase later. We have Amari Cooper on the team. He's making, I don't know, $100 million or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
Dude's a stud. He's not a stud. He's fine. He's a good wide receiver. Very good wide receiver. Just not a superstar. And then we have Ezekiel Elliott, superstar running back. And then we have Dak Prescott. And the Dallas Cowboys went out and put a pile of money into their running back, Ezekiel Elliott, so that they could not have Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott. They had to jettison one of them. They obviously chose not to jettison Zeke and instead jettisoned Amari Cooper. And now it turns out that Ezekiel Elliott is significantly worse than their backup running back. And you know who is not significantly better than Amari Cooper? Noah Brown is not significantly better than Amari Cooper. So, like, I like my stance on this.
Twitter told me that Jalen Tolbert was probably going to be about as good as Amari Cooper.
Oh my God. The Jalen Tolbert stuff was insane. It was like Michael Gallup's rookie year. Like people were like, "Oh, Michael Gallup, wide open depth chart, dude's gonna be an awesome." And then he
but Michael Gallup at least like actually had a good second year, and he like will have a long NFL career. Jalen Tolbert will probably be in the CFL in a year.
I was gonna say, and he had 600 yards as a rookie. That's not terrible.
Right, Jalen Tolbert might have 6 yards as a rookie.
Jalen Tolbert may not have 600 yards in his career, including the CFL. Anyways, like my stance on Tony Pollard has always been, I don't care because Ezekiel Elliott's there and they're going to play Ezekiel Elliott. Your stance on Tony Pollard is that he's awesome and someday something will happen and Tony Pollard will get to play. And sure, Zeke got hurt. He missed the game. And Tony Pollard was a top 5 running back in the world. Was he number 1?
No, because it was such a high-scoring running back week. Like most weeks.
No excuses. Was he number 1?
No, I said he would be top 5, and he was.
Was he top 5?
He was the RB4. Yeah.
The RB4? The guy's not even RB top 3? He's not even the equivalent of Chase Claypool at the running back position? This is insane.
Yeah, so Pollard came in. He honestly pretty crazy. Like I think about half the weeks this year, 33 points would have gotten you RB1. But insanely, this was the week where Kamara goes for a 40 burger, McCaffrey goes, I think, for nearly 40, Henry goes berserk. So they all take down the 1, 2, 3. Pollard comes in RB4, and Deontay Foreman actually rounds up the top 5 this week.
Of course he does. Adding legitimacy to Tony Pollard's top 4 season or week.
It's important to note Tony Pollard, in 100% of his career starts, has gone for at least 30 fantasy points. The reason why it's important to note that is that Tony Pollard was drafted in 2019. Since that time, which is now he's in his 4th season, how many games has Tony Pollard been the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys? 2, right? And how many games has Ezekiel Elliott been the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys at that point?
I don't know, 4 seasons, you say? What's 4 times 16?
Well,
Two
it's 3.5 seasons. Anyway, it's 55 times, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many times out of the 2 that Tony Pollard has been the starting running back has he had 30 fantasy points?
I believe it's 2.
Yeah, he's 2 for 2, right? How many times out of the other 55 games has Ezekiel Elliott hit 30 fantasy points?
I would venture to guess it's 0.
It's actually 1. He did it once.
Is that because Tony Pollard missed the game?
No, I think that was like in like 2019 when Pollard like didn't play.
Oh, yeah, naturally.
Since Pollard has like been a part of the offense, Ezekiel Elliott does not come anywhere near 30 fantasy points.
Where it's unfair is that Tony Pollard probably has never missed a game, so Ezekiel Elliott has never had the backfield to himself. Whereas Ezekiel Elliott has missed 2 games.
Well, he did have it for like 2 entire years when Pollard like didn't play, until eventually they were like, oh, like let's like play Pollard a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then now unfortunately they've reached the max. Jerry Jones, what an individual! Like
Beauty.
It's honestly, it's like almost impressive when you get to the point where you're just like, I have so much money that I can be as idiotic and like self-harming as I want to be, and you can't do anything about it. And like he just seems to get so much joy out of just standing up there and just owning the libs by just being like, we go, Zeke goes, baby. Like it's honestly comical. I'm actually torn. Okay, so let's talk about. We'll talk about Pollard as like a dynasty asset in a second. Okay, I just want to talk about Tony Pollard as like a football player, right?
Yeah.
So
he's one of those.
So my takes on like Pollard has like always been split in 2. Like the big thing, like I care about football, like I like football, right? And I like running backs, like that's just my favorite position to evaluate and talk about. And like my first take really was just like, honestly, actually, it's kind of evolved over the years. Like my first take was like, oh, Pollard is potentially kind of a fun player, coming out of Memphis, like just a unique profile. I didn't really think he was much of a running back. Then Ezekiel Elliott like started showing signs of decline. Then my take was just like, oh, I think Zeke is like probably kind of bad. And then Pollard in like a small sample might be kind of good. And then last year, like really my take was less like Pollard is like coming into last year. My take was less like Pollard is like literally one of the best running backs in the NFL. It's more like Pollard seems to be a pretty good running back, at least in some sort of role. And Zeke seems to be a pretty bad running back. And so I would not spend a first round pick on Zeke. And then last year, over like as Pollard's role expanded, they gave him more touches. It was like, oh no, like Pollard is like good. And Zeke is like bad. Tony Pollard is in a class with only like Aaron Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb in terms of where he's ranking in terms of rush yards over expected every year. It's one of those smell test stats where it's like if all of the other guys around him are that good, that's usually a good sign. I am not. So there's a lot of people in like the running back film community, not all of them, but certainly a sect of the running back film community that has always been down on Pollard, that always thinks it's impossible that he could carry a load. And to some extent, that just might be a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's like if there's enough people that think he can't carry a load, then they'll never give him a load, and then it'll like end in this endless feedback loop that never gets a chance to actually falsify itself. I'm not going to say that he 100% can carry a load over a full season. I don't know. All I'm going to say is like the absence of evidence to the contrary is not absence that thesis is actually correct. What I will say is that every time he's ever gotten the ball, he does really good things with it. And so what I would do as an organization is just like try and give him the ball more and then see, right? Like let's assume that there is a point of diminishing returns, at which point Tony Pollard is no longer like a particularly value-added back. I guess I would just try and reach it, right? Like I would just see, right? This is like, I don't know. I would just try and see, like, let's chug a little more. Let's do a little more. Let's do a little more. And then you find out. The thing is, Pollard's 6 feet, 212 pounds. Like, he's a little skinny for a feature back, for sure. But it's not like we're talking about, like, he's like 5'10", 180, right? Like, it's not something, like, absolutely unconscionable that a 6 foot, 212 pound running back could just be a lead running back. And he's a really dynamic playmaker out in space as well. He played slot wide receiver in college. He's typically been a high targets per route run guy. He just hasn't been a high routes run guy in Dallas because they usually use a lot of running backs and pass protection in their scheme. He's not very good at pass protection. He gets this opportunity, and I mean, he was remarkable in this game. He's breaking big plays all the time. This is now his third run. I believe it was his third touchdown run of like over 50 yards this year. where he gets this ball going to the outside. He's breaking tackles. He's sidestepping people. He's juking people in the open field. And his breakaway speed is unreal. I mean, I think probably Travis Etienne is the only running back right now in the NFL that I think can match him in terms of like a breakaway speed contest. The biggest thing that angers me and why I almost like don't even find it funny that Jerry Jones is so dumb. It's like running backs' careers just aren't very long. Like, I think Pollard is a pretty special player. It like deeply saddens me that he's wasted 4 years with this organization that has just chosen to completely waste his talents because they paid a very mediocre running back a ton of money. I don't know if he'll necessarily ever get a chance to lead a backfield because I think that it's fair that NFL teams would have questions of whether or not he can lead a backfield. I think he's shown enough in his opportunities now, and he's like joined enough of the mainstream where he's not just like some fantasy cult hero. Like people talk about him in NFL circles, where it would really surprise me if he doesn't get at least a decent contract and a chance to contribute as like a co-leader of a backfield next year. I pray that Dallas does not keep him, or at the very least, I pray that Dallas does not keep him with Zeke. If they decide like, oh, we're getting rid of Zeke and we're making Tony Pollard the feature back, that would be awesome. I don't think that's going to happen just because I think if that was their plan, then I think you would just try it now, right? Like to me, it's like to me, if that was in my consideration set, if I was like, I'm not sure what we should do next year with Pollard, I would just play him as the starter for like a couple games and then find out if I want to pay this guy or not. They have not taken that approach, so I don't think that they're going to re-sign him. Or if they do re-sign him, it'll be to a complimentary role. I hope he goes somewhere to an outside zone scheme where they can give him like 12 to 15 carries per game and 3 to 4 targets. And I personally hope that it's the Eagles so that he can beat the Cowboys 2 times per year and stomp on the star and make Jerry Jones eat shit twice a year for the next few years. But the biggest thing that saddens me is that I think that like, even if everything breaks perfectly for Pollard and he has this year that's incredible next year, he'll then be like 27 the next year and he'll probably not have the same type of breakaway speed and athleticism that makes him such a special player. And I guess most of all, I just hope that he gets a decent enough contract that he's able to like use this rare athletic talent that he has to benefit himself and his family. But it just really makes me sad that he's like never going to get the opportunity to fully show what he can do because of like some rich white dude who doesn't understand what's good for his football team.
All right. Yeah, no, like you've basically summed up my entire argument in the like many years that we've been arguing about Tony Pollard, and that Tony Pollard is never going to get a chance, and therefore rostering him is a useless waste of time because you get to use him like once a year. Yay.
So I think that that's like where I disagree in the sense, like I don't think that necessarily he's going to get a chance. I mean, he might. I hope that he does.
He's going to get a chance to do something at some point, but he's going to be 27 by that time. And
like 26. He'll be 26 next year.
All right, fine. Is he a free agent after this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a UFA. I mean, who knows with the Cowboys? They could fucking franchise tag him for all I know. I mean, I'll just be the position. Could you imagine if they kept Zeke and then spent like a $9 million franchise tag on Pollard?
It's the right thing to do. You got to run the ball to win. I saw Jerry Jones saying something about like Zeke finishes runs.
Yeah.
And that's why he's more better.
Yeah.
Than Tony Pollard. And I think that's really wonderful because, you know, if you can get into a position where you're, you know, in 2nd and 6 because Zeke finished the run versus getting, you know, 6 points from Tony Pollard by running 50 yards for a touchdown, it's the right thing to do. Because if you score a touchdown from 50 yards away, do you know what you're not doing? You're not controlling the clock. And the number one goal of the offense is to control the clock. And that's why you need to get 4 yards at a time. So you can run many plays and then potentially kick a field goal.
You got to establish
better way to do it.
You have to control you have to dictate terms. You have to control the line of scrimmage.
That's right.
You have to do all of this stuff.
The things you need to do.
There's like this. I'm going to break this into both a Pollard take and this also applies to Travis Etienne. I think that they're kind of similar, although I actually think that Pollard is like better. I think that he has less deficiencies than Etienne, although I love Etienne and he actually will have a chance to lead a backfield. He already had a chance, which is the power of draft capital. There's like a sect of the running back film community that irks me tremendously. And I say this because I grind running back film. Like the people in the Bulletproof Patreon know that like when I'm posting these weekly thoughts, I'm often including clips of running back runs. Like I'm describing why I like certain players. Like a lot of my takes on running backs come from film. Like my Khalil Herbert take this year was very much a film take. I was like, I'm watching this guy run. I think he's a perfect fit for this new scheme. He's going to be more efficient in this outside zone scheme that Getsy's going to be running than Montgomery is. Like, I think that running back is to some extent a film position, and I think that it has value. So I'm not like diminishing the idea of judging running backs through film. What I am diminishing is that I think there's a section of the running back film community that judges running backs on an athleticism curve. Like I think that there is a large prevailing thought that if we accept that like speed, burst, and athletic ability are dominant components of running back skill, that it like makes people's ability to judge film and understand scheme less important. And there's like a reactionary backlash to that causes people to overhype and overpraise technically sound, physically limited running backs, and then find ways to nitpick these special athletic explosive running backs that might have certain skill sets deficiencies that cost them a couple of yards on certain plays. And I'll just name them. Matt Waldman put out this thread on Pollard, and he was breaking down pretty much each of his runs. And
shots fired on the Bulletproof.
Yeah, firing shots.
Matt Bullets podcast. Bullets are flying.
You know what? Hashtag not sorry, Matt. Hashtag not sorry, Matt. Matt Waldman puts up this tweet thread, and he's showing each of these Pollard runs, and he's basically saying like, good game by Pollard, but he's doing this. Top end speed doesn't matter that much. He showed a couple plays, whatever, well blocked plays. I mean, the Cowboys O line crushed. Like a lot of the plays that Pollard had were legitimately well blocked. I'm not going to take that away. But then he gets to the end and he posts these two. And the first one, and this is like the condensation of everything that's wrong with this section of running back film analysis. First one, he says, this is what Zeke gives you that Pollard can't. And he shows Pollard running stretch play that's not particularly well blocked. He gets met about 1 yard after the line of scrimmage, and he does not get low enough. He's pretty upright. The guy tackles him at about shoulder height, and he goes down. Doesn't get any extra yardage. Not a great rep. Ultimately, what was he going to do? Was he ever going to break that tackle? No, there was no room. If he had a lower center of gravity, if he was a little stronger, could he have made that a 3 yard gain instead of a 1 yard gain? Yeah, probably. Probably Zeke makes that a 3 yard gain instead of a 1 yard gain. Okay, that's what Zeke gives you that Pollard can't. The next tweet, it says, this is what Pollard gives you that Zeke can't. And that is his 54-yard touchdown run, in which he takes another stretch play out, stretching towards the sideline, makes a great cut at the line of scrimmage. Now, Waldman says that Zeke would also make that same change of direction cut. Maybe. Would he be able to make it quick enough to get away from the D-line? I'm not particularly sure, but let's say that maybe he does. And then he says, okay, well, what Pollard would then be able to get around the corner. He says Zeke still gets around the edge. I'm not so sure Zeke still gets around the edge. I think he moves well vertically. I don't think he moves well laterally any longer. Let's even say that's true. What he says the difference is that Pollard is then able to outrun the safety and house it for a touchdown instead of getting tackled at the 30-yard line, which is definitely true. And then he's like, so there's some stuff that, Zeke can give you. There's stuff that Pollard can give you. But, the stuff Pollard can give you is 1 or 2 plays a game. This is why these people are bad at fantasy football, right? Like, because they don't even understand. Like, we wanted to name this show Chasing Tails at one point, because it's like the tail outcomes, the important outcomes matter. Pollard being able to turn what would be a 10-yard run into a touchdown matters a lot more than Zeke turning 1 yard gains into 3 yard gains. It doesn't really matter. It matters in a certain circumstance. It matters maybe at the goal line, right? Turning 1 yard into 3 yards, that matters.
That matters.
But at the 50-yard line on a 1st and 10, doesn't really particularly matter, right? So like, if you want to use Zeke as like a specialty goal line back, by all means. But like, and the other thing that's so funny, Jay Moyer puts out a tweet. He says, the issue with Zeke versus Pollard is that with Zeke, you can use your whole playbook, right? You can use your whole playbook. Mostly, they always talk about, Zeke's runs are deflated because they use them on all these inside zone runs. Okay, first of all, are we sure Tony Pollard couldn't be successful on inside zone runs? I'm not particularly sure, because it seems like he's successful on all the runs that he has by the numbers. Maybe he wouldn't be. I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's impossible that he wouldn't be. Also, if there's a type of run that is so predictably inefficient that it causes any running back who runs them to be predictably inefficient, what if we ran less of them? Like, why? Why are we having this take? Like, it's like madness to me. It's like, well, you just can't not run the ball up the middle repeatedly for 3 yards at a cloud of dust. And so if you're just giving all these running back, he's going to be pretty inefficient. It's like, maybe we should run less of these inefficient plays. Like, because the Cowboys, basically they were like, the Cowboys had to run a really restricted offense. Well, they scored 49 points. So it seemed like whatever restrictions they made, like maybe the eradication of all of the unexplosive, inefficient plays from your offense is actually a good thing. And it relates to ETN too. Like ETN makes mistakes. Like I think he's a way more mistake-prone runner than Tony Pollard. Like he does bad things. He's not as decisive. He doesn't have as good a vision. I think he'll work on that. He's a rookie, essentially. Tony Pollard is now in year 4. But like it's the same thing where people are like, James Robinson's so much better than Travis Etienne. James Robinson's so much better. No, he's not, right? He's not better. Because ultimately, like when Travis Etienne gets a hole, he's taking it for 40, 50 yards. Like this guy has now already tied the NFL record 30+ yard runs in his first 3 career starts. Because he's an extremely fast dude who's the most athletic person on the field. And that's ultimately just more important than getting small, minor wins and executing the scheme to perfection. That's why the people that thought Carter was better than Etienne are wrong. That's why the people who thought that Michael Carter was going to hold off Breece Hall this year because he has better vision between the tackles are so lost in the sauce of trying to defend their own project that they're just wrong. And so there's this. People were saying, actually the film people weren't wrong on Etienne, right? People were trying to dunk on the film people about Etienne. And some people were trying to, in defense, saying, no, they weren't wrong about Etienne. They were right about how he should be deployed, and they were right about this. And to that extent, it's true, right? I think that they were right about identifying what he can do and what he can't do. What they were very wrong about was assessing how much what he can do matters versus how much what he can't do matters. Because ultimately, if you were correct about identifying his skill sets, but you were unable to convert that into actionable advice, and instead you convert that into advice that says Michael Carter and Trey Sermon are better than Travis Etienne, then you are wrong. You are just wrong about the position. You're wrong about fantasy football. You're wrong about what NFL teams value, because the whole idea of being, I'm not a fantasy analyst, I'm a running back analyst. NFL teams decided to draft Travis Etienne in the first round, and they decided to make him a workhorse halfway through his first full season. NFL teams drafted Breece Hall in the second round. They decided to make him a workhorse immediately. These running backs are providing more value because explosive plays matter.
So you're 100% right. I love everything you said. I just really want to go back to what Jerry Jones had said, because I think it's just really insightful, and we should probably break it down in detail because of like how much people will learn from this quote, which I've pulled up for us to have a quick look at. And here's how it goes. So here, I'll set it up. This is what the article says. Despite that, Jones told reporters on Sunday that Elliott is in zero danger of losing his starting job, which rightfully so, because of these reasons. There is no argument, Jones says. Zeke's ability to punish, Zeke's ability to deliver, Zeke's ability, and then he just loses that ability. It's just Zeke's ability. What he does for us in pass protection. And frankly, Zeke's ability to make big plays are there. And we're going to go where Zeke goes. He's not integral to our success. And I think he's absolutely right, because there's one thing that we know about Zeke Elliott. It's synonymous. Like Zeke Elliott, big plays. They go together. And we know this because there's a website. You maybe never heard of it. You probably haven't. At playerpoker.com, they have wonderful metrics in which they track these kinds of things like big plays. And if you look at Ezekiel Elliott dating back to 2020, this is the last 3 years, dating back to 2020, you can see his breakaway run rate. His breakaway run rate is percentage of carries that go 15 yards or greater. You can see that he has a 1.6% breakaway run rate. And that is the type of big plays that make the Cowboys offense thrive. In 2021, though, it got better because Zeke is that good. He had 2.5%. That was good enough for running back 45 in the world. We're talking about the entire world. We're not talking about the NFL, the world. He's in the top 45 players out of 8 billion people on the planet. How many people are on the planet? Was it 8? 9? I don't even know.
A lot of people.
I've lost count. How many people? You must know.
A lot of people.
A lot of people. And Zeke's number 45.
Yeah.
That's like in the 0.000000001 percentile. Do the stuff. Then 2022 rolls around. This is what he's most recently working with.
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott out here just making the world embarrassed with a 1.8% breakaway run rate. Number 51 in the world. Again, in the like fractions of a percentile. Best player in the world.
Do you know what Pollard's breakaway run rate is this year?
Why don't you let me know?
It's 11%.
You should ask if Jerry Jones subscribes to playerprofile.com. He doesn't even have to. It's free. This is free on the internet. You don't even have to subscribe, Jerry.
11% versus if he did get all the runs that Zeke got, it wouldn't be 11%, but it'd definitely be higher than 2.
It's probably not in the 50s of NFL running backs. By the way, there are 32 running backs that start in the NFL. So Ezekiel Elliott is running for a breakaway run rate lesser than like half the league's backup running backs. Now, I think that a lot of times people get what I say a little bit conflated with what I mean. And what I say is that Tony Pollard is not a player that you want on your fantasy team because he's not going to score a lot of fantasy points because he plays behind Ezekiel Elliott. That doesn't mean that I think Ezekiel Elliott's the best running back in football. It means he's not going to get less touches than Tony Pollard because Jerry Jones says things like we go as Zeke goes. And I'm just not willing to bet on Jerry Jones changing his mind despite all of the evidence in the world. It doesn't matter. And that's why we don't want Tony Pollard on our fantasy teams. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
My point for Pollard and why I think he has been a good fantasy option. I mean, he has been because he's continually held or increased value. I think ultimately, like I've always said that he's like a second round pick that you can put in your lineup on occasion. Like he's going to hold value because everybody's counting down until 2023 because everybody knows that he's good. Everybody's been counting down till this free agency. And so you just hold him and hold him and hold him. And then if you want to sell before he hits free agency, just sell at that point. And in the meantime, you have the opportunity to score 30 points anytime that Zeke twists an ankle.
Which is like twice in his career. Ezekiel Elliott has missed.
Right, but he could break his leg tomorrow. Maybe I'm going to hit him with a crowbar. I don't know.
Perhaps that could happen. Tony Pollard's mom should hit him with a crowbar. That's what should happen.
You know what's honestly wild? Like, good for Tony Pollard. Like, there's so many disgruntled players in the NFL.
Anything. He's got it.
It's remarkable. Like Pollard is like always like so complimentary of Zeke and everything. Like, if I were Pollard, like he must be a significantly nicer person than I am. If I were Pollard, I would lose my mind.
This is non-alpha behavior. This is why he doesn't have the big target share.
That's a good point.
He needs to be a diva.
He needs to be more like Elijah Moore.
If he wants to eat, he's got to get on Twitter and call out the world. I don't know why I'm not getting the ball. I don't know what my chemistry is like with Dak Prescott. Could never get the ball. If I knew, you'd know. And I'd be the best running back in football. And he's going to say that. And he's not.
Well, that was a good Tony Pollard conversation. I'm glad that we've like agreed to something. I'm glad we've at least agreed on like the basis that Tony Pollard's actually good. That's like the one. That's like the main project of like my life is like I've finally gotten people to like capitulate on that point.
I don't think that there's any argument that he isn't good at football. Like I don't think you can't point to anything and say this player isn't doing well in the NFL. There's no metric out there that says he's not good. The metric out there that says he's not good for fantasy is that Ezekiel Elliott exists and Jerry Jones will never let that happen. So
at least Pollard is outscoring him this year in fantasy points, and that's just like a small victory that ultimately doesn't matter much for your fantasy teams, but it makes me happy. So
I have one other rant on this that just drives me nuts because people tell me that these players, these Tony Pollards and the AJ Dillons of the world, have standalone value.
I mean, Pollard does. Like he is an RB2.
He does not. He was scoring 10 points a game until Ezekiel Elliott got hurt. If you were starting Tony Pollard in your lineup for the past 7 weeks, you were not happy. His season-long fantasy points got buoyed by this like. He had an incredible, like Deontay Foreman-esque week this week. Thank God, because it saved his whole season. Like AJ Dillon, if you look at AJ Dillon's standalone value last year when he's like RB20, it came because Aaron Jones got hurt. And when Aaron Jones got hurt, AJ Dillon's production presumably went up because we know that's what happens with running backs. And if you were starting AJ Dillon in all the games that Aaron Jones was not hurt, you were not very happy because his running back, his points were so bad in those games that even when Aaron Jones got hurt and AJ Dillon got to pump up the volume on the touches, I don't know, wagon, I don't know what to call it. He got to get some freaking touches, and then he finally scored points. And yeah, that was a great start in the week that Aaron Jones was there, but he did not have standalone value. You sucked if you started AJ Dillon when Aaron Jones was playing football. I'm sorry. Same thing with Tony Pollard. He scored 10 points a game. That's not standalone value. That is
standalone value. I mean, it's
in a redraft league, you can get 10 points a game off the waiver wire almost every single
week.
Week.
But you can't. Yes, but it's the combination of standalone value and contingent value. Like I think Pollard is a better pick in best ball for that reason than in a managed league where it's like you're kind of just you're setting and forgetting and you don't have access to like all these different waiver wire running backs that may or may not like because you're not drafting Deontay Foreman in a best ball league realistically, right? So like you don't have that opportunity to pick up Deontay Foreman on waivers, put him in.
Why wouldn't you draft Deontay Foreman, the number 4 running back in week 8? That was a
number 5 running back in week 8. Number 5.
Oh, he's number 5. Yeah, Tony Pollard beat him. That's right. My mistake. Sorry, everyone.
Well, I'm going to try the segue this time. You know, I was talking about how Tony Pollard, if I were Tony Pollard, I'd be very disgruntled. There is a subset of the fantasy community that's very disgruntled. And this is going to be our last topic today. They're disgruntled about fantasy receipts.
No, you can't go here. Stop it.
Why?
Matt, erase that. Erase all of that. We have to talk about Chase Claypool.
Okay,
I've told all these things to support your argument. I'm very excited.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
I'll put that we made a mistake
because I got carried away talking about Tony Pollard and how great he is, and it doesn't matter.
Okay, I'll mark that we made a mistake at 124, and then we transition that into Claypool. Okay. Tony Pollard, we've talked about he's a really nice guy. Another group of people that are nice people are Canadians.
They are
Canada's preeminent wide receiver, Chase Claypool, was also known as Mapletron, also known as Slot Pool, also known as Mid Pool. He was.
This is why you don't get to give players names anymore. No more nicknames from you.
I think it's good.
Mid Pool. That's
a Kosh. That's a Kosh.
Oh, okay, a Kosh. You got to stop calling. You got to stop putting mid in everyone's name.
Yeah, Akash called him Mid Pool. Chase Claypool gets traded to the Chicago Bears for a second-round pick. And the prevailing thought on this was that it is a terrible move for the Chicago Bears. And the fun thing is that Chase Claypool exists like in this weird realm of NFL players where it's like he's relevant enough for fantasy that like we all have thoughts about Chase Claypool, but he's not relevant enough for fantasy that anybody's really out there talking about what you should do with Chase Claypool because he doesn't really matter that much. But people like were really more talking about like, what do we think this means for Justin Fields? What do we think this means for the other Pittsburgh receivers? What do we think that this means for like in the NFL sense? Is this a good move or a bad move? And I'll start first if you want to give a fantasy take on Chase Claypool. I personally think Chase Claypool is a guy where it's like he showed enough in his rookie year that I feel like he's not going away. He's like clearly an NFL player, but he's regressed / plateaued to the point where it's pretty clear he's not going to ever be a difference-making player. So he's like a guy where if people are like, I literally just don't want this guy on my roster, I'll take him on my roster. If people are like, I think this guy's going to break out, I'll be like, here you go. Give me a round 2 pick so that I can re-roll. That's where I'm at on Claypool. Do you feel any differently? And then I kind of want to talk about this more from an NFL sense because I think that's interesting.
I think Chase Claypool is perhaps a little bit more interesting than you do. And the reason for that is it kind of popped in my sophomore comps process.
Yeah, he had a great rookie year.
Yeah, he had a really good, really strong rookie year.
I was super into him after year 1.
It was really a tale of touchdowns, though. He scored 11 touchdowns in his rookie year, somewhere thereabouts.
But he also earned a pretty high targets per route run.
Yeah, he did. They didn't play him much, I don't think, early in the year.
Well, they didn't. He had a weird rookie year. They barely played him early in the year, and then they played him a lot. And then late in the year, even though he had been good, they scaled him back, and that was kind of a weird red flag. And then it was the same thing that happened in year 2, where he started off early in year 2. He wasn't producing anything, but his peripherals were pretty decent. And then Juju goes out, and it was like, okay, finally he's going to get to run all the routes. Like, it's just going to be him and Deontay. They're both going to be 85 to 90% plus route participation guys. He's always earned targets at a pretty good clip. This is going to be awesome. And then the first couple of weeks, he just wasn't earning targets anymore at a very good clip. And then he kind of started turning it around. He had a couple decent games mixed in, but the offense just wasn't working. And then he did that dumb thing with the not getting the ball to the referee in time. Yeah, and then they started scaling back his playing time. They started playing Ray McLeod more. They started playing James Washington again for some reason. And so then he just never really had.
Oh my God! Did you know that James Washington, according to the Pittsburgh media, was in fact good enough to be a starter on nearly every team in football, like a wide receiver 1 party, not a starter, the wide receiver 1 on every team in football.
Pittsburgh media is just completely deranged.
It's are they beating these guys? Chase Claypool once said not that long ago that he is a top 3 wide receiver, and he did not mean on his team. He meant in the entire world.
Yeah.
So
wow. I actually like Claypool. I think he's fun, and I think that he kind of got a bad rap. I think he's a fun personality. I like that he has a personality. I'm rooting for him. I mean, this year was he basically just played this slot role, which is honestly a pretty good role for him because despite being big, he's not actually very good at contested catches. He looks like Mike Williams, and he reaches for the ball like Mike Williams, but Mike Williams always comes down with it. Chase Claypool usually doesn't.
Just can't make that comparison. I feel like Chase Claypool to me is like my Mike Williams, where I'm
but he's poverty Mike Williams because he's not actually that good at contested catches.
I just think he's going to play a lot, and he's going to be on the field a lot, and he's going to make splash plays from time to time. And people are going to get excited about that because he's 6'5" and 250 pounds and like the most athletic player in football.
I think he's like a uniquely weird player though, because he's not actually that good at like the big boy wide receiver things, but he is a really dynamic athlete. Like, and in terms of what he's best at, like they give him rushing attempts on end rounds and stuff. Yeah. He's like pretty good after the catch. Like they were using him in a big slot role this year, and I thought that was a pretty good role for him. The problem was it's just Pittsburgh was so crowded. Like they have Deontay, who's a massive target earner. They have Pickens, who's good. They have Claypool, who's pretty good. They have Freiermuth, who's pretty good.
Pickens is good.
Like I think he's like good in an NFL sense. Yeah, he's a good player.
What?
I'm lower than the consensus on him in Dynasty, but like he's clearly good. Right? Like so
clearly good.
Yeah, like they had Deontay, who's like a massive target earner, and then they had minimum 3 other like starting quality good NFL players running routes on every play. And so it's just like hard to, and then that's fun if you have a good quarterback, but they had not a good quarterback. They had Pitch Trubisky and they had Kenny Pickett. So things are what's really going to happen. I am kind of excited about Claypool in Chicago. Yeah. I don't think that, I mean, the issue is though, like, I also think, is Claypool that much better than Mooney? Like, I think they're both kind of similar in the sense that they're like, why do you think he's better than Mooney? Because Mooney actually like earns a lot of targets. I mean, I don't think Mooney's all that good either. But
you put Mooney on Pittsburgh, how many targets is he getting? Because you're like, he has a lot of targets. He's not earning targets. He's on a team that doesn't have anyone. Cole Kmet targets on that team. Like, get out of here.
No, he actually doesn't.
He did last year.
Yeah, not anymore. That day is over.
Yeah, well, wow.
Anyway. I actually, honestly, the Cole Kmet people getting bodied is one of my favorite things this year. That guy sucks so much.
What's his target share this year? It's not that bad.
Oh, it's really bad. He's Cole Kmet.
That's number 20 in the NFL.
Yeah, he's 13%, which is weird because people said that he would get a lot of targets because there was nobody else to throw to, but it seems that didn't matter.
Last year. Like, that's right. Claypool.
Yeah. But Claypool's not. Okay, that's a good point. I think that if Darnell Mooney was on the Pittsburgh Steelers, we wouldn't know his name.
No.
I think he would just run down the field.
I don't even know if he'd get on the field to run down the field. He probably would. I'm being a bit facetious. Like,
I think Mooney's fine, but I think Mooney is like ideally Mooney is like a good stretch Z wide receiver getting 15% of the targets only on go routes. Yeah, like that's probably like a good scenario for Mooney, and he's like a better than average. Like if you're Darnell Mooney would, like if he was in like a Donovan Peoples-Jones-esque role, he would be very
Elijah
good. Elijah
Moore role.
Actually makes me so sad.
Role for Darnell Mooney.
Yeah. So you think Claypool over Mooney in Chicago for maybe let's not say this year because he just got traded there, but let's say next year you'd be expecting Claypool to outproduce Mooney.
I think so. Yeah. I think you're right. I don't think it's going to happen right away because Mooney is already like entrenched in this offense. Claypool's coming in midseason. He's going to have no time to learn the offense. They're just going to throw him out there and tell him to run like 3 routes on every play, and that's all he's going to do. It's going to be super uninspiring, and it's going to be fun.
To be fair, that's about all the routes that he can run. He's not exactly a polished.
So, right in his wheelhouse. It's perfect. No, but like seriously, he's just going to be. He's probably going to walk into like his similar role in Pittsburgh. Like,
so the time to buy him then, if we want to buy him, is in a month when he hasn't really done anything.
Yeah, don't buy him today because there's going to be some people that think, oh, he's in Chicago now. Also, like, I don't know that we're really going to get Justin Fields throwing passes at a very reasonable clip.
Because Justin Fields has turned around his fantasy value, but he's still not doing anything for the offense. Like Mooney has been the clear top dog in terms of he's like earning a lot of targets or getting a lot of targets, receiving a lot of targets, whatever you want to say. But he's being targeted a lot. It doesn't matter. He's like barely a wide receiver 3. I don't even know if he is a wide receiver 3. He's probably not. Cole Kmet's obviously nothing. Nobody else there is anything.
Did you just say Darnell Mooney's a wide receiver 3, like in fantasy football?
Well, I thought that he was for a second, and then I realized that he's probably like a wide receiver 6.
Matt, you're going to want to cut that section out because Darnell Mooney is actually wide receiver 65 right now.
Oh, that's
he's not a wide receiver.
How can that be? There's nobody else to throw to.
How could that be? There's nobody else to throw to. Oh my goodness! Big hit target strikes again.
Actually, I have a bet in the Discord for most points per game this season, and I had Gabriel Davis. Hoagie has Darnell Mooney, and Wheezy has Rashad Bateman, and boy, we're looking good.
Oh.
Anyhow, I like the idea of a Claypool thing. Like, if Fields takes a step forward next year as a passer, because he's been better in fantasy this year and in real life. Most of his improved fantasy production lately is because he's running a lot more and he's passing enough to move the offense, but he's not passing enough to great fantasy value for others. But the hope is that maybe he will in the future, and it looks as though he's no longer like a suicide bomber as a passer. So that probably means that maybe they'll let him pass more.
Like,
I
his
think
passing isn't actually that bad. Like he's completing only 58.5% of his passes.
Yeah, but he throws deep.
I was going to say, but on a 9.2 air yards per attempt.
Right.
And he's got nobody to his best wide receiver is wide receiver 67 in fantasy football. He has no one to throw to. He's not great. Don't get me wrong. This isn't Lamar Jackson in year 2 by any stretch.
No.
But like this could happen. Like he could be Jalen Hurts was around kind of this level of passer, I think, last year. I'm not saying he's going to be Jalen Hurts in Jalen Hurts' third year is not going to be Justin Fields' third year necessarily. Yeah. But I think it's possible that Justin Fields is an NFL starting quarterback for a long time.
Is Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney like the most poverty version of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith possible?
Yes, absolutely. The most poverty version you could find. I love it.
Like, they're even the same. It's like you have one guy who's like big and wears 11 and has a lot of swagger. And then there's like the other guy who's really skinny. And then you have like Cole Kmet is like a really sad version of Dallas Goedert. You just have like their whole offense is just the worst version of the Eagles offense.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah,
they are the significantly worse Eagles.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the actual NFL terms though, because I think that's interesting.
Wait, I just want to give my final take on Claypool.
Yeah, go for it.
I think I would like to buy Claypool because I think he's a guy that could pop at some point, and people will still remember his athleticism, and they'll get excited about his size and speed and his RAS score and all that kind of stuff. So he's got good potential for a big value jump, even without big production. He's also probably going to have a reasonable chance of still producing the NFL, and therefore I still want to be buying him. Any second round pick I would buy him for, I would trade off an early second for Chase Claypool at this point.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I probably would not give an early second. I think I'd give a mid to late second.
No, I'd give an early second. I'd rather have Chase Claypool than a lot of players, I think. Like, I'm not saying he's a lock for a top 24, but in the early second, you're not getting guys that are necessarily a lock for a top 24.
No, you're not.
You're getting pretty good guys.
But I would just rather take I would just rather take a swing at getting a guy that I think like either has more potential to be like a top 12 guy, or because like I'm pretty sure at this point Claypool is never going to be a top 12 guy. So I would just rather take like a swing at the unknown of getting maybe a top 12 guy. But I do think it's possible Claypool's a top 24 guy. I wouldn't like write him off of that being possible.
Well, after his rookie year, I think it's reasonable to suggest it was very likely he would be a top 24.
Oh, I think it was.
And
after his rookie year, I was in on Claypool. His second year and third year have left a lot to be desired. But
like you're right. He's probably not a top 12 guy, but I think it's still like a better than average chance that he's a top 24.
I wrote about Claypool actually in one of my weekly thoughts like about a month ago or something. I think it was like it was the game where Pickens finally started earning targets, and that was when I was like, okay, like Claypool's clearly like probably not gonna be the number 2 in this offense, or if he is, he's like the 2, like A/B/C with the other two guys. And I was like, Claypool's probably dead for the rest of this year. He's probably dead as long as he's in Pittsburgh in terms of being a meaningful asset. But like guys with his rookie profile just don't like usually vanish into thin air. If I were to guess, he's going to end up in some other team at some point, and he's probably going to have a season where he starts popping up back into our lives again. And I hope that happens because he's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I think is going to happen. He's going to float around for a while. He's valued at like a mid to late second. So I think that's pretty fair value. I would buy him for that pretty easily. I'm probably not going to go off for early second for him, knowing now that he's not worth that. But maybe that changes with the trade. I don't know. But Anyway, NFL.
Let's talk about the NFL, like because I mean I think that everybody was like really out on this trade. I think in part that people like to just confirm their priors, and I think that people's priors are the Bears are a dumb organization, and so when the Bears like do something, people like to be like, "Oh, lol's Bears." I think that this was a perfectly reasonable trade. So I think that similar to kind of the discussion that we just had about would you trade an early second round dynasty pick, would you trade a mid second round dynasty pick, like. I think that, the chances of the Bears drafting a superstar is higher with the second round pick that they just traded away to the Pittsburgh Steelers than it is Chase Claypool. And the absolute upside outcome is that you draft a superstar and you have them cost controlled for 4 years plus potential franchise tag, versus now they have them for a 1.5 plus potential franchise tag. So that's fair. The ceiling is definitely higher. And I'm usually like the chase ceiling guy. I guess the reason why I think this deal is fine is that, to me, everything should be viewed through the lens of Justin Fields' valuation, Justin Fields' development. Like, the two most important things the Bears should be factoring every decision through right now is Justin Fields good? And if we think he's good, how can we help him be as good as he can be? Like, that's so crucial to me, everything with Justin Fields. And like in fantasy, the replacement level is much higher than the replacement level for an NFL player. Like in fantasy, we're talking about, if you don't score 14 points per game, we don't really care about you. In the NFL, it's not that. It's like, can you draw coverage? Can you be a guy that wins this matchup? Can you be a factor on an NFL football field? And the Bears just didn't have NFL players. Like, N'Keal Harry is not an NFL player. Equinemius St. Brown, not an NFL player. Velas fucking Jones, like, these guys just aren't NFL players. Chase Claypool might not matter in fantasy. He might not be a superstar. He's probably not a wide receiver one of an offense, in a really good offense. But like, he's clearly an NFL player. He's clearly an NFL starter. He has skill sets that can contribute to create offense. And so to me, I'm willing to sacrifice that little bit of ceiling and say, okay, in order for us to evaluate and develop Fields properly, we need to put him around actual NFL players at positions of need. And so, like, to me, of all of the bad trades in the world, they didn't go trade for a fucking linebacker. They didn't trade for a guard.
They traded away linebacker.
Right. They didn't trade a running back. Like, people were like, Roquan Smith is better than Chase Claypool. Absolutely. Roquan Smith is better at playing linebacker than Chase Claypool is playing at wide receiver. The difference is they would have had to pay Roquan Smith a bunch of money to play a position that doesn't really matter that much anyways. Certainly doesn't matter in terms of evaluating your quarterback, because nothing else about your team matters if your quarterback is not good. And if Justin Fields is not the answer, then you need to redo it with another quarterback. Chase Claypool is a lot more impactful to them being able to evaluate Justin Fields. He's a cost-controlled player, and he's a real NFL player at a position that really matters in the NFL largely, and especially matters for their position right now as a franchise that they really, really need. And so to me, if they look at the 2023 wide receivers and they say, you know what, we think the superstars are going in the first round. We just want to secure having a real NFL player. We're going to do it in a second-round pick. They still have their own first. They still have the Baltimore second. They can still draft another receiver. They can still draft an O-lineman with those picks. I think it's a totally reasonable deal.
Yeah, like in the NFL, yeah, it would be better off if they were a really good team. Like, let's say, for instance, this team already has a bona fide wide receiver one. Let's say Darnell Mooney is actually awesome. Then in that case, they should absolutely not be trading for Chase Claypool. But they don't have NFL wide receivers. And that's a big problem for an offense. And that's a big problem for Justin Fields. If the reason they're not passing the ball at even like a league worst rate, like they're passing the ball at like a league worst rate in 1950. They need to be passing the ball at a league worst rate in 2022. They need to pass 30 passes.
Right.
Because you need to do that in order to win games, even at the bare minimum level on a regular basis. Like, Justin Fields is probably never going to lead the league in pass attempts. Justin Fields needs to pass at Lamar Jackson levels, or they're not going to win a lot of football games. No, he doesn't have to be as good as Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks.
Yeah, they need to be the Eagles. They just need to be like a normal team.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Chase Claypool, yeah, he's an NFL player. And then this is one of the discussions we had a while ago about the which team was it? The Kansas City Chiefs, and how, like Sky Moore isn't getting on the field, but he's playing with NFL players, so that's not really a huge indictment. That's not what's happening in Chicago. They don't have NFL players. They need some. Sure, you could draft a superstar A.J. Brown level prospect at the top of round 2 next year in the 2023 draft. That's possible. That's what the Tennessee Titans did. They drafted A.J. Brown at the beginning of the second round. He was 211, I think, or 210 or somewhere thereabouts. So it's possible to get a superstar there. I'm not saying that. But there's a lot of second-round picks that are not NFL players. And surrounding Justin Fields with one of those is detrimental to your quarterback's development. The fact that you can get Chase Claypool today helps him develop over the last 8 weeks of the season or 9 weeks of the season. So I'm into it. Second-round picks, just for instance, since 2003 to 2019, we have 75 second-round picks. There's a lot of second-round picks. The historical hit rate of those players is 28 out of 75 have hit a top 24 season. We're not talking about superstars here. We're talking about like decent NFL producers. That's a 37% hit rate. So we are taking Chase Claypool, who probably has a higher hit rate than that, I think, anyway, of hitting a top 24 season. I think he's probably more probable than 37% chance or historical hit rate. So I think you're getting like kind of a median outcome or a little bit better right away. Sure, you're not getting the tail where you're getting a genuine superstar. Chase Claypool is not Megatron as he was formerly billed. He's not even DK Metcalf, which was the popular year 2 comp. But anyways, so then we have to also consider that they know what they're getting. And Chicago has a history of drafting not such great players already in their first.
They literally forfeited a 3rd round pick the second that they selected Velus Jones this year. They just decided we would rather not have a 3rd round pick.
They could have picked anyone in the 3rd round. They picked Velus Jones. So
we literally should not have been drafted.
I'm not going to run out to best case.
Wouldn't have been a good 7th round pick.
This is the front office that is destined to pick AJ Brown in the 2nd round. I just don't believe that's true. If we look at my prospect grades just across the 2nd round, we have 15 bulletproof prospects. We have 19 coin flips, 11 long shots, and 29 bust tier prospects drafted in the 2nd round. Out of these 75, that's a 20% chance of just throwing a dart and hitting a bulletproof prospect, a 25% chance of throwing a dart and hitting a coin flip one, 11% at 15 or 15% at hitting a long shot, and 39% chance of just hitting a bust if you're just throwing a dart at a wall at a 2nd round pick. So, and that's just their prospect tiers. Then if you break it down to the grades, sure, if they draft a bulletproof wide receiver in round 2, you're looking at 10 out of 15. That's a 67% hit rate. That's pretty good. Like if you could get one of those guys, except they drafted Velus Jones. They're not looking at the same things we're looking at at all. They're looking at we are reading an English.
Velus Jones, by the way, who is older than Chase Claypool.
It's brutal.
Currently.
Coin flips, they've hit historically 9 out of 19. That's 47%. Long shots, 3 out of 11. That's 27%. Actually, the busts in the 2nd round have been doing pretty good. 6 out of 29 at a 20% hit rate. By doing pretty good, I mean relative to the other rounds where they're like on average about a 12% hit rate. So they're out hitting in the 2nd round. Nonetheless, these are not good hit rates. You can do a lot of damage to your quarterback's development by picking players that are not good, by surrounding him with N'Keal Harry and Equanimity St. Brown and Darnell fucking Mooney and all these guys that are just not good at football.
The other issue is like there's compounding effects to not knowing what you have, right? Like if you draft a wide receiver in the 2nd round and it's Schrodinger's wide receiver, like you don't for sure know if they're good. You don't know for sure if they're bad, but like you've invested in them enough that like then that blocks you from doing other things, right? Because you're like, oh, this is part of our answer, right? So you're probably not going to sign the superstar free agent and draft, the wide receiver early. You're probably not going to draft a wide receiver in the 1st and draft a wide receiver in the 2nd. You could, maybe you even should, but that's just not usually how teams operate. With Chase Claypool, you know exactly what he is. You know that he's part of your solution in your wide receiver room. You also know he's not the final solution for your wide receiver room. So it frees you up to do other things where you take care of one thing now, which is getting NFL players. And then you're still like, ideally you have an offense where you have, Chase Claypool as like your big slot wide receiver. You have Mooney as your stretch Z wind sprint wide receiver. And then you still have that superstar X wide receiver next to the both of them. And that will certainly make Chase Claypool not a fantasy value, but in terms of the Bears team building, that's ideally what you want to be doing. The other thing I will say too is like there aren't that many positions that like really matter in the NFL, in particular where the Bears are at, right? Like most of the positions that we say are quote unquote unimportant, like guard and interior defensive line, off-ball linebackers, safeties, all that stuff. Those things matter on the margins, right? Those things matter on teams that want to compete. Running backs, those things matter if you're ready to win a Super Bowl and you already have all the important positions. That's why you're ready to win a Super Bowl. The Bears are not that. They don't have an O-line. They don't have wide receivers. They don't have edge rushers. They don't have the positions that matter. So the idea that you're just going to say, well, we're for sure taking a wide receiver in the 2nd round, like you don't know for sure that the wide receivers that you'll want, the wide receivers that you have rated highest, are actually going to be there. The wide receivers that fit your scheme, they might not be there. And so then what are you going to do? There's other positions if need, right? That's fair. You can default to them, but then you're still stuck without a wide receiver and you really need a wide receiver. And so are you going to end up getting trapped taking a wide receiver who doesn't fit, a wide receiver that you don't want? That's not good. You don't want to be reaching on players. So I think this just gives them more flexibility. It's cost controlled. I like it. And I like it for Fields. I think that it's a strong idea, and we'll see what their final outcome is here. But to me, overall, what they did, where they get off Roquan Smith and his future contract, they're able to go get Claypool for a 2nd round pick. They got a 2nd round pick back for Roquan. I know that they traded an earlier one and they got back. They also got a 5th. I think honestly, it's a pretty good job by them.
Yeah, I'm completely fine with it. I don't think it's a home run by any stretch. I'm
No.
not like, oh man, look at the Bears, they're awesome. But I don't think it's like how they're getting chastised in the social media sphere right now is a touch unfair, I think. And I also think
it's good for the Steelers for what it's worth, because
it's
they're in a different spot. The Steelers don't need a wide receiver, right? Like you can always use a third, but they're fine. They have Deontay Johnson locked up. They have George Pickens locked up. They have a really good tight end. Like they're okay. So if they can just get a second round pick that they can use on whatever, right? It's a different situation.
Well, the Steelers won the trade without question, but I don't think it's like a massacre and that the Bears have forfeited their future by trading for Chase Claypool. I think the most important thing is, do we have a quarterback in Justin Fields? And I think having Chase Claypool on the team at least gives you some indication whether or not you have Justin Fields as a franchise quarterback, because it should allow them to pass at a reasonable rate to see if Justin Fields is even good. And maybe they don't have to pass 9.6 or whatever yards down the field on average. That seems a little extreme. Anyways, that's Chase Claypool. And
that's our 1 hour episode. That was actually an hour and 50 minutes long.
We're not going to go 2 hours.
So it is 1 hour in the sense that it's less than 2 hours.
That's true. We are rounding down from wherever we are.
It's 1 hour in the sense that if you were to say how long is this episode and you were to describe it, you would start with 1 hour and then you would say something else, but you would start with 1 hour before you'd say how many minutes.
Well, I guess it depends. Do you want to talk about more things?
No, I gotta go.
You want to do the last segment?
What was the last segment?
Fantasy receipts.
Oh, 5 minutes. All right, we're gonna close this off.
5 to 25 minutes on fantasy receipts, and then we'll be done.
Okay, this is the last thing. We're gonna talk about fantasy receipts.
So, is having your receipts pulled and being upset about it soft? That's the first thing we need to determine.
Yeah, it's soft.
Yeah, it's soft. It's so soft. I think that it's really soft, and that's what I'll say on that regard. I think when you're doing something like this, where you're putting content out into the world for the world to consume, you need to be willing and able to handle the criticism that comes with it. And having a bad take is fine. You're a fantasy football analyst. I saw somebody say, Mike Liu said this at one point, and I really like Mike Liu. And this is a great quote where he said, "We are stockbrokers, not fortune tellers." And you have to keep that in mind when we're doing fantasy football analysis. And when people are judging you, you need to understand that no matter what you say, people are going to judge you. You can go onto Twitter and say, Tom Brady is the GOAT, and people will tell you, no, he isn't. You're an idiot. He's not the GOAT. You can go onto Twitter and say, Tom Brady is the GOAT, and you'll have the same amount of people telling you, of course he's the GOAT. He's the dude. Like, he's the dude GOAT. So no matter what you say, people are going to be upset by it. You're going to make misses because we're not fortune tellers. We are stockbrokers. We're trying to make the best bets that are going to help win fantasy championships. So you need to be willing to understand your role in this as a fantasy analyst, that you're going to have misses, and it's okay. And people will judge you for those misses, and you can't let it affect you, even though it may affect you. But if it does, don't look at it. Nobody's forcing you to go read the damn comments on the fantasy receipt pulling. Anyways, that's my first point.
I think that the people who would be really upset about this, honestly, probably lack somewhat of a coherent process. Like, I think that if you're making choices based on a process that you've put a lot of thought into, like, you already know that if you're engaging in any form of probabilistic process guided results, that you're not really trying to bat 100%, right? Like, you're not trying to make a million different individual choices that you think are going to work. Like, you're trying to say, like, here are some general principles that I'm applying in which I view this game. And like, maybe that's a data model, maybe that's game theory principles, maybe that's like just a set of heuristics, maybe that's film, whatever it is. Like, you're applying a process to a number of different individual bets within that process. And you have to know that in a game that's this variant and that's based on probabilities, that like a number of those bets are going to fail, even if you have a particularly good one. You just have to accept that. And also, I think like you just need to have enough faith in your audience to accept that. I think that the people who follow me generally, for the most part, are intelligent enough to realize that I'm going to give them bad individual advice in some sense, in the sense that I'm going to recommend that they do things that ultimately wind up being detrimental to their team. I hope, and I believe quite strongly, that on net, if people were to follow all of my advice, their teams would be better. Does that mean that they're also not going to do things that are extremely detrimental and damaging? Absolutely, they will. Like, there's 100% takes that are like embarrassingly bad, some of which I would make the same take again. I think it was just random chance. Some of which I'm like, no, actually my process was off there and I would change it. But we're all going to make mistakes of process. Our process is going to lead us off course. I think that you need to have enough faith in your audience. And like, if it tilts you relentlessly that people are like, oh, this guy got this take wrong, like I'm going to unfollow him. It's like, whatever. I don't really want those followers. Like, honestly, it makes my experience worse when I have like followers that I think are just total dummies and don't get it. I spend more time in the Discord because I can actually have an intelligent conversation with people in the Discord that like, they're not expecting us to be able to be fortune tellers. They're not living in the moment, reactionary to every single hit and miss in the moment that it looks like a hit, even though 3 weeks later that's actually a miss. Like, I just don't want to be associated with people that would view it like that anyways. So I don't give a shit about fantasy receipts. Pull my receipts. I have plenty of dumb shit wrong. I have enough confidence in my process that the people who back me as an analyst won't really care if my receipts get pulled that show my embarrassing takes. I think they're probably aware of my embarrassing takes. They probably stare at them on their teams every day. Sorry. Yeah, I think that it's lame that people care so much about fantasy receipts. Yeah. Whatever. I mean, people have the right to react in any way that they react. I'm not going to say they don't have the right to. That's totally fine. I personally could not give less of a shit about fantasy receipts, and I welcome them to pull my receipts. I hope that they pull more of my receipts than the people who get legitimately upset about it, because like legitimately upsetting people is like not great. Would I ever run the account? No, I have things to fucking do with my life. But like the fact that it exists is not like make me sad.
That's my next point, actually, is I think that if somebody wants to run a fantasy receipts site or account or whatever it's called, I would not care less. I don't think it's a detriment to the industry. I don't think it's I don't think it's anything. I think it's whatever. But what I will say,
it's not ruining the industry. Come on.
Yeah, somebody said it's ruining the industry today, and I called them soft, and a bunch of people commented about how that's not okay. Whatever. The point that I'm making now is that the person or people running the fantasy receipts account have to realize that they're basically useless. Like, if you want to be in this space as a community, in the community space, as a creator that are helping people win fantasy leagues, pulling other people's receipts is like the most monkey thing you could do. A monkey can pull bad receipts. An actual content creator comes up with new and unique ways to view fantasy football and help people win fantasy leagues. That's what content creators do. And I think that's where some of my like annoyance with it comes from. Again, couldn't care less if people want to pull my bad takes. I know what they all are. I made them.
Yeah.
My process led me to this take. I stand by it. I'll do the same take again next year. Just wait. It's going to happen. But where the annoyance comes in is these, and Frank, am I right, or however you say his last name? I don't know.
Frank,
my dude Frank, who I famously have
your sparring partner
and friendship with. He was pretty upset at this fantasy receipts site, and he was like, well, they don't even have there's no skin in the game for them. I'm like, yeah, no, their skin in the game is nothing. They're completely useless, and they're uncreative, and they have nothing to bring to the world.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, I don't follow them, and I never would. I have no interest. They provide no value.
But yeah, it's just like, it's super cowardly to pull somebody else's receipt when you have none of your own. Like, that's
when you're anonymous.
When you're anonymous, like, I just
talk about soft. I mean, they're the ultimate softies here. Like, they're like acting all brash, like, oh, you guys can't take the heat. It's like you're hiding behind an anonymous account to make fun of people for takes that were proven wrong after the fact. Like, obviously, this person is a total loser. And I have no problem calling them a total loser. That's why I just laugh. Like, yes, like if you're running the fantasy receipts account and you're listening to this, you are a loser, like a capital L loser. I don't care. You can pull my receipts, but you're a total loser. I mean, the one thing that I will say about the fantasy receipts account, like, I just wish that they would actually get it accurate. Like, for the record, like, I have a lot of available receipts. Like, I literally said that the answer to Miami's Dolphins backfield was anybody but Mostert. That was obviously very wrong. I said that Tua Tagovailoa is one of the most overrated assets in Dynasty, which I still believe, but at a very much inflated price that proves that he was not, in fact, one of the most overrated assets in Dynasty. I said that I had Tyreek Hill as one of my worst picks of the round 2-3 turn. Him and Chubb, actually, I thought were the two worst picks around 2-3 turn. They were actually the two best picks around 2-3 turn. Like, I have a lot of stuff that I got embarrassingly wrong. The one that they chose to take was like, it was about Penny versus Walker. That was my first one that got in there. And I was like, is either running back going to be worth starting while they're both healthy? No, which they weren't, actually. And then I was like, is either one going to catch a lot of passes? No. And like, they didn't, actually. And then I said, are the Seahawks going to be a good offense that scores a lot of touchdowns? No. And they are, actually. So that's 1 for 3 they got right. And then I was like, who's more likely to be the workhorse, Walker or Penny? And I was like, it's Walker. And I mean, I got lucky in the sense Penny got hurt, but like, they were dunking on all these Walker tweets, and they chose my one that said draft Walker and not Penny, which, like, I would say I mostly just got lucky on, but the take was actively correct. So I just think that they should try harder and find my actually bad takes. That would be my only piece of criticism. That, and they should stop like spending their life digging up tweets from others hiding behind an anonymous account like a total loser. But I also think that the people who are like actively stoking them by being like, how can they do this? It's like so lame. I don't care. Pull my receipts, fantasy receipts.
Yeah, their first take they pulled on me, I don't even remember what it was, and it wasn't even a bad take. It was like, this wasn't even a miss, really. Like it was.
I know, try harder.
And I was like, do better. Like, pull my Jalen Waddle take. Like, that's a brutal take.
I know
that one. And then they did. Yeah. But yeah, it was really weird. Anyways,
yeah, good old John Ross.
The other thing I want to just say is that they think they're like proving accountability here.
Right.
And this is like the furthest thing from accountability.
They have no accountability.
Going to judge an analyst based on a one-off take at a point in time when you don't even know what their actual analysis was at the point in time that matters, then you're just not getting a full picture. And on a singular take, like we give takes on like 150 players, and you're picking out the one bad take. Not that there's only one, there's more. But like you're picking out a singular bad take and saying, haha, look at this idiot. Accountability, nerd. It's like, no, accountability is, hey, here's all the players I liked, and I got these ones wrong. I got 6 of my 57 players that I thought were really good wrong. And that's my accountability. That's true accountability. A singular take is not true accountability. It's nothing. You're just making fun of the person or the take, whatever. From an anonymous account that has no talent. I'm sorry. I'm just.
Are we getting soft now? Are we triggered?
Am I triggered? No,
I think triggered. Are we triggered? It sounds like we're getting soft. No, yeah. I think it's just funny. The fantasy receipts account, and I do enjoy how worked up people get about it. I mean, I do and I don't. Like I don't know if it's like impacting people's mental health negatively, like that's a bummer. And like whatever impact it's creating negatively outweighs whatever impact it's creating positively, because it has no impact that's positive.
There's no positive impact.
You're right. There's no positive impact, and clearly there's a negative impact in the sense that people feel negatively impacted. Yeah. So like I would prefer, I guess, like if it didn't exist in that scenario. Does it affect my life? No. But I don't know. I think it's whatever.
I think that's one of the biggest things is like empathy is really hard to like feel for people on a daily basis. Like if you can live your life feeling empathetic for everyone else's situation all the time, good for you. I can't. It's like you probably, if you're listening to the podcast, you've probably seen me on Twitter. I don't always care what other people think. And I think that it's like, I don't know. If it's bothering other people, then to me, that's like, hey, you know what? Maybe don't do that. But it doesn't bother me. And I do kind of think like if you're bothered by like people on the internet saying you're dumb, the internet's going to be a rough place for you. It's not just fantasy receipts. I promise. There's a whole bunch of people out there telling you you're dumb. And for me, it's like, I don't really care if people tell me that I'm dumb. My thing is I hate it when people tell me that I'm wrong about something that I'm right about.
Right. That I do. That bothers me a lot.
Just don't understand at all what I'm saying. And then they think I'm wrong. And I'm like, listen, you're not understanding the point. Like, yeah, I put out a tweet last week, and
when people mischaracterize my takes and then like take them out of context, and then they like make a take that was actually good or like average or whatever, make it seem bad. That actually bothers me. Yeah.
Like I put out a tweet last week, a short little thread of all these guys in this one Discord. Like I didn't care that they think I'm an idiot. They can think I'm an idiot all they want. What I cared about is they were saying things that were false about me. They're like, he's changing the process as we go so that it looks really good. Like, I've never changed the process actually, and that's factually incorrect. And like, if you go through and look at people's opinions of you, somebody in that particular Discord had a post being like, remember when DF Bean Counter was pounding the table for Najee Harris once he was drafted in the first round? I was like, okay, what? You couldn't have got this more wrong. I have never been pounding the table for Najee Harris, other than in 2020 when he was going to be a second-round pick in Dynasty Rookie Drafts. I liked him then. That's when I was pounding the table for him. He went back to school in 2020. He played pretty well at Alabama, I guess. He came out in the draft in the first round. He was my running back 3 in the class. I had him as a massive sell since he's been in the NFL. And how on earth did you get, I'm pounding the table for Najee? Like, that's the kind of thing that annoys me.
Yeah.
And
like,
if people, you think I'm an idiot for pounding the table for Najee Harris, that's one thing, which I would be an idiot if I was pounding the table for Najee Harris. And you have every right to call me an idiot for pounding the table for Najee Harris, but I would never do that because he was Najee Harris. He wasn't very good. So, like, just come on, get the take right.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. Get the take right. Yeah. If you're gonna pull tweets, if you're gonna do that stuff, just make sure you're being accurate. Make sure you're being accurate, right? You know, have some accountability, Mr. or Mrs. Fantasy Receipts. I mean, I'll say this, like, I don't know. I used to work in politics. I was a student union leader for 2 years. Like, the things that people would say about me on social media and in newspapers then, like, about my actual character and about, like, who I am as a human, were, like, horrible. And, like, that stuff was awful for my mental health. Like, yeah, like, if people are out there that I actually know, or, like, people that interact with me, or people that, like, could interview me, are, like, going in, they're like, this person's a terrible person, this person, like, believes these things, this person does this, like, yeah, that stuff bothers me. It's about, like, my character's person. If people are like, oh, like, that guy was too high on Sky Moore, like, I don't care. Like, yeah, I was, like, right, like, it doesn't, like, I'm not, like, less of a human being because I'm wrong with Sky Moore. I'm hard on myself with takes. Like, yeah, like, when I miss something, especially when I miss something that I think I shouldn't have missed, right? Like, when I think I actually made a process error, or, like, when there was something that, like, I think my process could have led me to and I didn't get there, like, I promise you, like, I'm up at night thinking about it. Like, I am a perfectionist, and I want to be able to, like, at least from a process level, be able to look back at each take that I make that year and either have it be correct, or look back and say, well, I didn't get it right, but I think the process on it was sound. Like, when I look back and be like, oh, I think I made a process error on this, like, that really does bother me. But, like, it doesn't make me feel, like, worse as a human. It's just like, okay, I got to work harder. You know, I'm not going to be perfect. And I can't imagine that there's anybody, if there's anybody in the fantasy industry that looks back at the end of the year and they're like, I made 0 process errors this year. Like, I think they're probably just not diving hard enough, right? Like, I think everybody did it somewhere. So yeah, I think that accountability is good. I just think that, like, accountability should be, like, yeah, like, it's just useful accountability, right?
Yeah.
Here were my takes. These were good. These were bad. These were bad, but I would make the same thing again. This was bad because I actually made a process error. Whatever. The receipt pulling is dumb. Still doesn't bother me, but yeah.
I also, like, if you're gonna pull receipts, have your skin in the game. Like, have it be like, you know, you and I are arguing about Sky Moore versus George Pickens. We both have a side. Either of us are open to winning or losing. When you're fantasy receipts, you don't have a side. You're literally just, like, shitting on people all the time, and it's super lame. And I can't, like, if you could imagine that you have 24 hours in a day and you could do anything with it. You could be as productive as you want. And the way that you want to spend your productive time is by pulling receipts that help no one. Like, you're helping absolutely no one. Pulling my receipt about Jalen Waddle versus John Ross helps no one. Like, everybody who followed me at the time knew that take. Everybody. I can't imagine anybody didn't see me say Jalen Waddle is the next John. I retweeted that after I had already said it once, and it went, like, huge at that point. And that was before the season. And then Miami Dolphins Twitter got a hold of it, and it went, like, I got quote tweeted into oblivion. And the interesting thing about that is it didn't bother me at all because I felt like the process was fairly sound. I wish I would have had him one spot higher in my rankings. That was my regret, which I never would have drafted him anyway because I didn't have him anywhere near his ADP. But I did have him in one spot lower than I should have. And that was a regret, and that was my process error. And if I had him where I think I should have had him, I still would have been wrong, and you would have been pulling my receipt on it anyway. And it doesn't matter. You only have so many hours in a day. Go do something productive with it. Something that helps someone. Something that helps yourself.
Yeah, go like take a crowbar to Zeke's knees. That would be productive.
Take a crowbar to Zeke's knees. maybe see if you could talk to Jerry Jones's shrink, and maybe they could do something with the way his brain works. I'm not sure. That might help. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you could force a trade of Tony Pollard to, I don't know, anywhere.
I prefer an NFC East team.
Yeah, I don't really want him in Philly because
I want him in Philly.
Doing all right, finally.
I would love Miles Sanders to die.
Why? What do you mean?
Because I actually like Miles Sanders, but I think that you've been too high off the Miles Sanders supply this year. We need that to get reined in. Your seat. At least CEH is dead. I appreciate that. So you can have Miles Sanders at least now.
Yeah, CEH is still top 24 running back. You're out here touting the top 24 running backs like it's a thing, and then you're like, CEH sucks. He scored as many points as Tony Pollard does.
Who do you think you'd bet to score more points the rest of the season here, Mr. Pollard or Mr. Edwards-Helaire?
Rest of the season? As of today, when Zeke is back healthy? Probably Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Because Tony Pollard only scores 10 points a game when Zeke's healthy.
I will send this to fantasy receipts at the end of the season.
I think that we should send all of our content to fantasy receipts from now on, specifically this episode. I think that this is the one episode we need to submit.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we had a lot of really receipt pulling-ish takes in this episode. Yeah. So
I look forward to fantasy receipts pulling some James Cook receipts.
The other thing that I find, back to fantasy receipts for just a second, they're like, we're enforcing accountability. And they're like,
here I thought that we were in under 2 hours, but we're back up over 2:10 now.
Pulling random receipts from they're not randomly pulling receipts. They're pulling individual people's receipts 80 times. And they're like, we better mix it up. Let's get that guy in here. And then they pull one of that guy's, and then they go back to someone else and pull 60 of them. I'm being facetious. They're not pulling that many. But and then they pull 6 at a time. They're like, this kid, he got this wrong. Well, let's grab 5 or 6 more of them. And they post a whole bunch of the same person at the same time.
You know what else is kind of wild? Why don't they actually they're small game hunting, right? I feel like they go for all of these, they go for all of the intermediate people, where it's we're established enough, people know the names, but not the big, go after the CBS, the ESPN people, right? Like Matthew Berry made Zeke a my guy. He's getting outscored by his Tony Pollard. Go after Matthew Berry.
Go for fantasy receipts. Go for Matthew Berry. What are you doing? They're the whole system just reeks of jealousy to me. It's I didn't make it in this industry. I tried. I suck. I'm going to pull other people's receipts so that everybody else knows that all these unworthy analysts are unworthy. And they're all fairly moderately small accounts that they're pulling from. It's you're probably someone in that range, and you're just fucking jealous of these other guys. Or you came up at the same time. This is somebody that got in the industry 2 years ago.
Oh, clearly.
These guys blew up and I didn't. And they're nobodies. And they're like, we're going to pull their receipts.
Yeah, it's all the people that came up the same time that I came up. So I for sure know it's somebody in the same circle. Or somebody who came up a little bit earlier that was these people passed me by.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's brutal. It's just embarrassing. And fantasy receipts, I feel bad for you. I'm trying to feel empathy for you right now because you're
sorry for fantasy receipts.
Sad existence. And it's better. It gets better. I promise. Just put in the work, get some good takes out there, and it's going to be fine. And anyway, do you want to talk about anything else? Are we done?
No, I want to get out of here.
Matt, it's been 2 hours and 12 minutes. Jacob won't stop talking. Every time we're done, he adds another topic. So I'm going to cut it off now. And this is it. This is the show, everyone. Come back next week. We'll talk about some more fun things.
Have a good one. Bye.